consent.
Great. Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Looks like we've got everyone here that is coming. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 1:02 p.m. and start by acknowledging with gratitude live and work on the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish. These people have been stewards of these lands and waters surrounding Oqualaham, Bowen Island. And welcome to the Bowen Island Municipality meeting of February 12th, 2024. And thank you for joining either in person or online. I'm Andrew Leonard, the Mayor of Bowen Island Municipality and the Chair of this meeting. I'd like to introduce, as I do at the start of every meeting for folks that have not been to council before or joining us later online, the other elected members of our council. Starting on my right this time, we have Councillor Judy Getty. On my far left, we have Councillor John Saunders. To his right is Councillor Tim Wake. And to his right is Councillor Alison Morse. Joining us online today is Councillor Sue Ellen Fast, who we can see on the Zoom screen, and Councillor Alex Jurgensen may be joining us later. We're also joined by several members of our professional staff this afternoon, including our Chief Administrative Officer, Liam Edwards, and our Corporate Officer, Sophie Insignia, and other members of staff who may be presenting reports here today. This meeting is being recorded, and when members of the public speak during the public comment and question and answer period of the meeting, your presence and voice will be included in the permanent recording, which is available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca, as well as live streaming on YouTube, and where the recording will be kept in perpetuity. This council meeting is an official forum for the conducting of the business of local government. We all love our home. We are all passionate about what happens here. I would encourage everyone to maintain a constructive and respectful tone during the meeting and to direct comments for council during the public comment and the question and answer portion of the meeting to myself. For those that are following along online or here in chambers, the agenda and full council package for this afternoon's meeting can be found at bowenislandmunicipality.ca. And with that, I will look to our corporate officer for the addition of any late items to the agenda.
Yes, there were 4 late items that are provided on table. 2 letters regarding the on-island composting facility, one from John Lawrence and one from Donna Scorer. 9.3 was an on-table item, and that is an application from the Birch to the Bowen Island Community Foundation that they are looking for support. And 1 letter from Mark Edmonds regarding the item 10.1, the Crown land.
Okay, thank you. And with that, I will look to council for a motion to approve the agenda and non-table items for the February 12th, 2024 regular council meeting. Moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Saunders. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand, say aye. 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 And that carries unanimously. Thank you. And moving on to item 2, public comments. I will look to our corporate officer for how many public comments do we have?
There are 5 today.
So 5 public comments. All of our commenters this afternoon, you will have a full 3 minutes to make your public comment. The timer does not start until you come to the front table or whether you're comfortable on Zoom, so don't feel the need to rush. We'd like you to get settled and feel like you have all the time that's available to you. There will be a beeper and alarm that you'll hear at 2 minutes and 45 seconds to give you the last, to give you that kind of 15-second warning and to let you finish up your comments to make any last asks of council before your time runs out. And with that, I will look to our corporate officer for our first comment today.
First, we have Michael Collins on Zoom.
Mr. Collins, are you here with us on Zoom today?
I am. Sorry, totally wasn't expecting to go first. That's okay.
No problem, no problem. So whenever you're ready, feel free to go ahead. We can hear you here in the council chambers.
Thank you. I wanted to be part of the conversation regarding the dog leash parks, and I'm actually just kind of curious as to how this discussion is going to play out. So I'm actually like to sort of wait and listen to what people have to say about it, and then maybe sort of chime in at that point if that's possible.
Right. So the structure of the agenda doesn't make it possible in that format. So what you can do is at the end of the meeting, there is a question and answer period where
Okay.
members of the public can ask questions and get answers to questions for items that appear on the agenda. I would be happy to take questions there. The public comments
that would be
section really, okay, great.
I
Thank
just
you.
want to note, that that's not an agenda item that we have today. It's not on our agenda. So,
Q&A is on our agenda?
the Q&A is, but the item of, I believe it was dog. Sorry, Michael, I had you down here for dog leash parks.
Yeah, I thought that's what you guys were discussing today.
No, that's not on the agenda for today. The flexibility that I would accord as the chair of the meeting is given that public comments do appear on the agenda and that we're going to hear about dog leashes a couple of times, is I'm happy to take questions about that at the end of the meeting.
Okay,
Even
then
though-
I will be here at the end of the meeting. Thank you, guys.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Collins.
Hey, next we have Andy Weavers.
Mr. Weavers, feel free to come and join us up here and grab a seat. Thank you.
I apologise in advance, this is slightly disjointed. Witness Peterson, who was to present this, has unfortunately had to go into town with her mother for a medical emergency. This is in reference to the editorial which Oidis posted in the Bowen Island Undercurrent a week or so ago, referenced the sewage outfall pipe and related issues. Essentially, our comment, I'm the accountant for Union Steamship and Dock Morgans, is that there appears to be somewhat of a credibility and expectation gap between what is actually being achieved and what is actually being put forward as plans for the sewage outfall pipe and all the related issues, and what the public actually is being made aware of. Now, I'm going to throw some dates at you here only because these dates are what have been passed to me. Back in 1999, and all this information was extracted from the Birmingham Municipality Civic.net, there was a council minute which essentially said that the 75mm outfall pipe from the Snug Cove sewage plant out into Snug Cove should be kept to that size because it's a very useful choke on development in the actual Snug Cove area. Sounds fair. In 2013, however, this pipe was badly damaged and a dive crew was sent down to investigate it, and it was decided that this pipe could be repaired. What is quite unusual is that exactly the same issue then appears to have occurred between 2013 and 2023 in terms of this actual pipe. Was this the same damage? Was it actually further damage of the same sort? Reason we ask is the 2013 damage was apparently repaired, quite straightforward, and through an insurance claim. And yet the 2023 damage, or damage which has occurred between there, is being put forward as a parcel tax and to actually replace the pipe, accompanied by some rather odd comments along the lines of the state of this pipe, its necessity to be completely replaced, repaired, is 100% down to the actual users. Those users are people who live in Snug Cove. Their existence in Snug Cove is as a result of a development policy followed by Bowen Island Municipality. If they were aware in 1999 that the pipe was kept at that size, primarily to actually restrict development, was this not cognizant when they actually issued development permits between then and now? Why wasn't it? These are publicly available minutes. It's very odd to actually consider that development and sewage infrastructure is actually being conducted apparently in a vacuum from each other. The current pipe is actually being replaced, we are told, with one which is substantially larger, approximately 1,100% larger in terms of capacity. 1,100%. So 11 times the size of the pipe that was there originally. I'm being told that there's been development to the extent of 11 times the actual capacity, that the amount of people and the amount of users of the sewage system in 1999 is now 11 times larger. Was this pipe ever designed to actually keep this back at that smaller size? Why was development not restricted? Why was it not considered, if development was actually to be expanded, that this pipe itself should in fact have been expanded much sooner? Was this pipe being monitored? Damage occurred between 2013 and 2023. Surely this was being monitored. Was this being inspected? I'm sure there are rules and regulations as regards the actual inspections of this kind of infrastructure, especially given that it's an outfall pipe of sewage treated, understandably, into an actual federal water with a marina, 2 marinas, in fact, and with people who use the beaches. Interesting questions. The problem is 3 minutes isn't enough to actually ask the questions which are actually arising here, because there are actually too many questions stemming from even these few questions. For example, the damaged pipe was cut off last year, October time, for example. When this pipe was cut off, who was informed? Was Union Steamship Marina? No. Bowen Marina? No. Metro Parks? Not that we're aware of. Wouldn't it have been a sensible idea, given the environmental risks, the environmental impact that this actually had, and obviously has had for some considerable number of years because of the high E. coli count actually in the Snow Cove, why wasn't this brought to users' attention? Communication, credibility and expectation gap. It's expected that the municipality would communicate with everybody for an issue like this. Not necessarily a public actual comment, but to the people who are immediately adjacent, those who are immediately affected.
Right.
Why wasn't there? So at the moment, realistically, as far as we can see, the consequential impact of whatever's going to be done with the sewage outfall pipe has to be done in a full and transparent fashion. There is history going back to 1999 of policies, of plans, of intentions, of previous councils, of BMI staff, none of which appears to have actually been considered by subsequent councils. You don't expect council to have a crystal ball and be able to actually look back and see what every single person has ever thought of, going back for 20 odd years. But surely there is an archive of information on the subject of something as important as a sewage infrastructure to actually consider all of the various reports, all of the information, all of the intentions. Even though a current council may not agree with those intentions were put in place by a previous elected council. Wrong as they may be, obviously that's going to have an impact on anything which is later adopted as either a policy or a financial decision.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. You are at time.
Thank you.
So I appreciate you being here today and thank you for your comments.
Yeah, hard copy of that, or do we have a hard copy?
I'm not sure if you have a hard copy. If you do have a hard copy of your
It may or may not help, it's just my notes,
if you
but I'm more than happy to actually share them.
share them to mayor and council at bimbc.ca, because I know Councillor Morris has been around for a while and we've had conversations with her about what's coming up. And the Snug Cove sewer outfall pipe and financing of it continues to be an issue and the conversations are ongoing. So thank you for being here today.
Who would like to pass it?
Our corporate officer. Thank you.
Next, we have Julie Vick on Zoom.
Just note for the corporate officer and for the room that we do have Councillor Alex Jurgensen with us now as well. And Ms. Vick, I see you online. I think we can hear you as well. Oh, your audio is incredibly garbled. You coming through like a robot chipmunk. I'm not sure. Ms. Vick, we can't hear you right now. There's something going on with your audio. It's not that you're muted, it's that it's just completely garbled. So I'm not sure if you're able to change your microphone source.
No, that's no better.
Really, I think you might need to just leave the meeting and come back in.
Right, so what we'll do is great. So we will come back to her at the end.
So next on the list was Chris Mackey.
Right, Mr. Mackey, feel free to join us up here at the front. Mayor, councilors, staff, welcome.
Here today to express my disappointment and frustration with the recent motion to enforce dogs being unleashed around Grafton Lake. This motion was passed without any public consultation, even though this topic is notoriously contentious and affects many residents who enjoy walking their dogs in this area. I find it unacceptable that the Wood Council ignored the views and opinions of the people who elected them and instead followed the request of one lone resident, Kathy Robertson, who asked the Environmental and Climate Action Advisory Committee to, quote, not make a big deal of it, quote, just get it done. This shows a lack of transparency, accountability, and disregard for the democratic process. I also find it ironic that Councillor Sue Ellen Fast, who supported the motion and who sits on both committees involved in this motion, acknowledged on more than one occasion that requiring dogs being unleashed is a particular issue that many people on Bowen Island are very passionate about. If that is the case, then why was there no attempt to engage with the public and hear their feedback before making such a drastic decision? For an issue that is so contentious and surrounded by so much passion, then surely a motion restricting dogs being off leash should have been subject to at least a modicum of public scrutiny, considering the whole chain of events that led up to the motion was kicked off by a single letter and not some deluge of dog interaction complaints or concerns about their impact on nature. I urge the council to reconsider this motion and to conduct a proper public consultation before implementing any changes that affect the rights and freedoms of the residents of Bowen Island or the beloved furry friends. I also request that the council be more transparent and responsive to the public in the future and not let the personal agenda of one individual override the common good of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mackey.
I can email you that if you want.
Okay, next we have Matthew Redcock.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. I didn't write anything.
That's no problem. You can play jazz at
I'm
home.
riffing.
3 minutes. Okay.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what the most constructive thing is that I can share. And I think it actually has to do more with the process. And we've heard that before, but I mean, I've lived here for 20 years. I've sat where some of you sat in other processes. And over the 20 years that I've lived here, I've become less convinced that the public process works the way that it should. I've put myself out there with Chris to field sort of inquiries and to try to move something with this. And I've been surprised by the people that have contacted me. I've asked no comments, just call me, let's have a conversation. And people that didn't expect to contact me, people that didn't be a part, people that weren't part of the environmental agenda in the past, just like normal people, have been calling and sort of ranting and getting upset about it. And I think it impacts a number of things. Primarily it impacts a disposition against conflict. I think people have chosen to walk on Grafton because up until now it was sort of off the radar. People knew that if they walked on Crippen Park around that lake, they would end up in conflict. There was a lot of negative energy on Facebook about dog walkers off leash, and I think conscientious Bowen Islanders just choose to not bring their dog off leash. Now I think a lot of people do walk off leash, but for myself, walking off leash when it results in conflict isn't attractive. And so Grafton was sort of an alternative. And so I've been walking on that lake with my dog off leash since before there was a bridge. Carried my dog over the bridge, and I was surprised when it became a bylaw so quickly. I thought that because we've been walking there for so many years, and it became sort of, I think, the conversation on that lake would be that we recognized that this was a safe place to walk our dogs, that we weren't going to be in conflict. We weren't going to stir up a nest, right? If we encounter someone who said, I'm not comfortable with your dog off leash, the response usually is well, there's no other place we can walk on the island that is a loop, that is flat, that has easy access where we can park our car, where we don't expect to have conflict. I don't know what else to say to that, really, because I'm riffing, I'm short on notes.
Right.
Yeah. I guess I'm just hoping that something positive can come out of this. I think that it would be a very positive opportunity for engagement with the community and to find out what we can do. So I think that's my 3 minutes. I'm saved from having rough anymore. Thank you.
I think I would ask you on one question here, and this was something that Councilor Gooding and I were talking about prior to the meeting, is that council can't catch everything, right? Just given the
Oh, yeah.
breadth of what we work with here.
Yes.
One of the things we were using on, and maybe now I don't know, Jess, is that one of the things that I've noticed the year that I've been here so far is that an issue happens, a decision is made, and then it's like all of the conflict kind of happens after the decision is made. And that's despite having council agendas published and committee agendas published and like public comment periods and whatever else. And I guess what I'm asking is, given your history on the island and your history in paying attention to the processes on the island, how do we move that more upstream in a way that everybody feels engaged beforehand? Because even when we have it, like even with the budget engagement, we have like 2 or 3 people show up to an open house. I'm curious, from your standpoint as a long-term resident, if you were to riff on what upstream engagement looks like, what would that actually?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. There was a time when the Undercurrent had a municipal reporter. And I think when they decided to cut that position, we lost a few members. Because I always thought the most important thing that the Undercurrent brought was the municipal process to people before and after a decision was made. I also miss Murray Skeel's bailout. It was always effective, and I think it created a lot of change that wasn't unbiased, right? But it was very powerful. Before COVID, we had Philosopher's Cafe and different things where people could talk, but we've lost a lot of those institutions now. But I remember when I was on the Sustainable Advisory Committee and we finally brought in Rogers Rules in order to deal with some of our conflicts in terms of conversation. I think that it might be helpful even to say something like, this bylaw that we're discussing, this is a yellow bylaw. This is a red bylaw, meaning we're open for conversation with this bylaw, or no, this is a hard stop bylaw. I've had a little bit of conversation with some staff and I understand that, it's possible that the intention of the bylaw is to have an end of the rope knot, so that if something happens that's profoundly bad, council has some way of responding. And this might not necessarily be something like speeding in the cove, which is a hard stop.
Right.
So if the community was to be say hey, don't expect that we'll have SWAT teams on the loop authorized to take you down with a license, yeah. But and now I'm getting nervous, so I'm not even talking properly. Judy, you have something you want to say?
Okay. You may ask a question or a clarifying question, but public comments we can't.
So my recollection of this whole process was that there was some discussion. It was referred to staff. We got a bylaw back and it went to committees, and we got a report from staff. It went to committees, it was discussed in committee, it came back. So we touched it 5 or 6 times on our agenda with virtually no letters at all from anybody until the bylaw was passed. And now there's
I know.
There's 3 delegations today on dogs.
Yeah.
Right? And it's one of those things that it's a little difficult to hear that it was never discussed in public and that the council wasn't responsive, because it's a much longer process in terms of passing a bylaw. So now we have to deal with the feedback and what we're going to do with that. But in terms of the figuring out how to, when we get the comments and we start the process of the bylaw, and it's all very minimal at that point, maybe that's when we have to hoist something up on the flagpole in terms
Yes.
of, you're gonna love this one.
I think I agree. I think it needs to be the end game is a bylaw.
Evenly split in terms of the.
Yeah, I've got 3 children. My youngest is still 12, and I remember the days when I could not come to these things because my life was utter chaos. Right. So there's a lot of people that can't pay attention.
Yeah.
I'm only here because we're strike. I should be at work right now.
And it's municipal politics. It doesn't necessarily generate
But ultimately, I'm trying to find a place of low energy where I'm not in conflict. And I've got a personality that goes for conflict. So for me, it's really important to engage this properly because I don't want, I am so comfortable with conflict. If I'm on the loop, someone approaches me, I have no problem with a throwdown. I don't want that for my life anymore. I don't think anyone else wants it either. We want to be able to go in loving our neighbors, trusting we have each other's back. And, you know, and there's some kind of give and take, you know, my dog should not jump on you. I agree. But you should not jump on me if my dog's off leash behaving itself and you just don't like that. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Mr.
Yeah, thanks for engaging me too. That was fun riffing.
I'd like to move on to,
We didn't pass a new bylaw. There was a section of the existing bylaw, 4.3, of
Public spaces.
places.
Yeah.
That the interpretation was that if there was unreasonable damage could cause damage to the environment, drinking water, or public property. So we didn't go and pass a whole new bylaw,
Yeah.
a recommendation.
It would have been a great time to jump on the Facebook loop and say, hey, as representative council, you got it wrong. Let me rephrase what's going on.
I've also learned in many years that sometimes just
Stay out. You need a different personality to do that. Yeah. Thank you for hearing me.
and then we have Ms. Vick back on.
Maybe. Can you hear me this
Yes.
time?
You are
Oh.
coming through loud and clear.
Hooray, hooray. Well, just before yeah, thank you for hearing me, Mayor and Council. Before I get on to housing, which is what I'm here to talk about, just with the bylaw on the dogs, in that bylaw, it says that you can either prohibit times or places. I just wish that the times part had been considered as well as the places, because I think that compromise could have worked really well. Anyway, I'm here to say that I really support the recommendation from the Housing Council for council to talk to the province about getting some crown land for housing. My choice would be public housing or something like that. My background in it is I've been advocating for this, or I did advocate for in 2011 when the national park debate was on, when the argument was used that the crown lands needed to be protected from logging and that the federal government was the only ones who could do it. And I approached at that time the lieutenant governor about getting some of the crown lands and turning them into community woodlots or community lots. She got back to me with a couple of different ways that we could get control over the land and use it. And I think housing is an awesome way to do it rather than logging. If it's saying that it's part of the environment and the trail system is optimistic and sort of well, it's true right now. And I think we can still fight for it, and I'm a champion for that. But I also think that I really miss all my musician friends and everybody who's had to move off the island because it's gotten too expensive. I think that the diversity of our island is just getting, it's so narrowing, and I'd like to keep it as wide as possible. And I think something like affordable, not to mention artists and people who don't have a lot of money, other people too, but also people with mental health issues and or just aging in place. But I guess we have blown court for that. Also, if it was a community woodlot, you know, we could sell a lot of that deadfall and have volunteer things through the school, where it does open up a lot of volunteer possibilities, maybe even with the Habitat for Humanity kind of project. Not suggesting at all that we would go in and take out huge swaths of trees, but it would be interesting as a community woodlot or something like that, in conjunction with some public housing, to have a demonstration forest that some kids in the school could help look after, or make it a part of a project, or do a liaison with one of the universities. And that's what I came to say. So thank you for hearing me.
Thank you for being here, Ms. Vick. It's appreciated.
Yeah, great.
That's all we have for public comments today.
Okay, and that concludes our public comments. Thank you to all of our commenters for taking the time out of your day, for being here and sharing your opinions and sharing your thoughts. It's always appreciated to feel that participation in our role. Moving on to item 3.1, delegations. Rob Glure, the chair, and Jamie Sheffer, the executive director of the Hearth Arts on Bowen, regarding their annual report to council. See Ms. Sheffer joining us here, and Mr. Glure is on Zoom with us today.
Hello. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for inviting us.
Thank you both for being here. It's appreciated.
Technology's awesome.
I'm in 6.
Yeah. Right. So, thank you, Mayor, Council, and staff for inviting us to come and present our annual report for Hearth Arts on Bowen. With me and part of the team for the Hearth is Rob Gore, who is our chair of the board of directors. And Gail Lotenberg is also on our board. We're here to present our annual report and also just to give you a little update on, things that we're doing down at the Hearth and other plans that we've got in our back pocket and some of our successes and some of our challenges. So we are grateful to BIM for the annual core funding. This funding helps leverage granting and support from other grant partners. It also helps with our day-to-day operations. I hope you've all had a chance to look at the presentation because I'm not going to go through it slide by slide because that would take a long time. But I thought I would sort of highlight some of the main parts of it. So I'm just going to skim through here. So here we go, the Hearth successes. I'm just going to highlight a couple of them. One of them is we're growing the support for not only the visual arts, which is part of the gallery, but hosting performance arts, theater, film, written art, and art workshops. So we're not just focused on visual arts. We are an a la carte service of arts on Bowen. We're also in partnership with the new community center and helping make that center a great success for the arts. We're also very fiscally responsible with a very tight budget, running our business. And I highlight that it is a business of some sorts with a variety of revenue making events, community events, all while supporting arts on Bowen. We also had a great success this year with the launch of the Eagle Gallery stage, which is out in front of the gallery. It's a partnership with the library. And we launched it in June last year. And it's been a great success since then. We've had a lot of events on that stage and we continue to book and partner with local organizations to have sort of art events on the stage. And you can see the list of all of our successes. They're fantastic. We had a lot of successes and we continue to grow in that way. Now here are some of our challenges. Things like higher costs to deliver programming with limited staff and resources. That's always an ongoing challenge, as with any organization. There is a decreased government funding with more competition for the same funds, as I'm sure BIM understands that as well with your grant writing. And that, those are the sorts of things that we are focused or challenged with, I guess, more on a day-to-day basis. Just a quick stat events for 2023. You can see, some of the great things that we're doing and the benefits of it that we have. I've broken down some of the stats between 2016 and 2023, so you can see how things have been rolling along. Our visitor numbers are way up from other years. The number of art gallery shows that we have increased over the years as well. A lot of that is due to when we put our call out each year, we get more and more applications for artists to have a show in the gallery. I think we're getting too popular, but no, I won't say that. We are very popular. The number of artists that we host in the gallery, the numbers have gone up. And also the number of artists in our gift shop Our gift shop is like a little business for us. It's a way to represent artists from Bowen Island with their sort of smaller items like books and pottery and jewelry, and our gift shop does very, very well. It's a great little destination to buy a gift and a card for a friend. Now I want to get into our income statement from 2017 to 2023, and I've broken it down into just sort of 6 main categories. You can see here by the spreadsheet, those 6 categories. 4 of them are income, and the other 2 are expenses. And you can see the difference over the years. Remember that COVID was in there, so there was some dips during that year. But our grants, we're getting more grants mostly because we're doing more programming. Those are not necessarily operating grants. Our art sales have gone up substantially. Our fundraising sort of levels about the same. And our membership numbers that I think this year will be exceeding that number. Salaries and contracts, you can see that there was a bigger increase in 21-23, and I do have an explanation for that. And that is due to accumulated income, or not income, but just accumulation of revenue, mostly from COVID recovery grants. The Hearth was able to hire a part-time staff in the fiscal 22-23. And a lot of this was to restart and relaunch our programming after COVID. Now with COVID funding drying up, we are back to the usual 1 full-time and 1 part-time staff person to deliver all the programming that we've been so successful with and that we've built upon with our successes. And then the program expenses and artist fees, you can see, have gone up because our art sales have gone up and the gift shop sales have gone up. So therefore, we pay the artists there. It's 65% when you're represented in our gallery. So we're actually giving artists a great paycheck each month for selling their art. Win-win. Here's a little breakdown of those numbers. Yeah. So partner events, we have lots of partners that we're working with. We have a lot of volunteers. The value of our volunteers is over $100,000 a year. We're very grateful that we have so many people from our community that want to be involved in our arts organization. The Performing Arts Committee is a newer committee. It's about 2 years old, and it's chaired by Dale Lotenberg here. And this committee is tasked with working with them on the community center and programming and making the community center a success in regards to the arts. We've been doing a lot of work in the background. It hasn't always been really obvious what we're doing, but we're hard at work with this committee and leading the way with really good things. This is just a quick overview of items that we are working on. The stage is complete and we're booking it. There's Simon, there's the stage. We're very grateful to Simon. He created this incredibly beautiful carving, and this was part of the ceremony that we had last year. Very, very wonderful. And since that time, the stage has been named the Eagle Gathering Stage, which is very fitting with the carving, and it is a gathering place for people to come together. This is a schedule of upcoming shows for this year. You can see it's a full slate. We are planning, or we're right in the midst of the planning of our Indigenous Festival, which will be coming up for the month of June. We did unfortunately have some bad news on a grant that we had applied for, so we may have to cut back on some of the events unless we find some other grant or sponsorship funding, but we're working hard on that right now. community center, which we are so excited about and fully supportive of making the center such a great hub for the community. And we're continuing to work on our cultural master plan. We have had some great successes and we continue to work on following that plan and trying to tick off the list. We had an EDI or IDEA workshop back in the fall. It was very successful and the community came out for that. Yeah, we just had an art school in January. Just want to highlight that. It was an amazing success. It was so much fun. Almost all of the workshops were sold out and we were able to pay all the instructors full pay, full rate. We had a lot of really fun workshops. We had ukulele and juggling and swing dance and art workshops, and it was fun. The Hearth Gallery was buzzing for the month of January. And this is just basic information, and that basically is it. Any questions?
Councillor Morse.
The accountant in me. You said you've got $100,000 worth of value in your volunteer. What do you use for the hourly wage rate to calculate that?
It's more of a guesstimate, Allison, than a, it's very hard. It's like things like if we do an event here on Bowen and people come over from the island or from the mainland and they stay in accommodation and they eat out in the restaurants, it's really hard to quantify that.
No, the value, the 100,000 of your volunteer value
So
time.
what's about $30 an hour?
I can also mention that the BC government, through its gaming grants applications, encourages that volunteer time. They used to have a complex formula combining, professional expertise that is offered versus unskilled labor. And but what they do now is for all types of volunteers, just to round everything at a $20 per hour value, and they take those values into account when they're assessing for their grant making in the community grants program. So I think that's in how the round figure here, which is probably an underestimate of the real value if we were paying for all of our gallery volunteers and event volunteers over the course of the year.
Thank you. I'll look to council for any other questions or comments. Seeing none, I'll just conclude with thank you for being here.
Thank you.
For all the work that you do.
Yes.
It looks like there are a number of exciting projects that have concluded last year, but also thanks for giving us the vision for what's upcoming in the future.
And a little shameless advertising, the mini art show is on right now. It's our major fundraiser of the year. You still have time to come and bid.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Moving on to item 4, the consent agenda. I'll look to council for any items that council would like to pull from the consent agenda. Mr. Morse?
4.3 and 4.4.
Any other councillors looking to pull items from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion to adopt the consent agenda. Moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Saunders. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Oh, you're unmuted.
And that carries unanimously. And over to you, Councillor Morse, for item 4.3, the amendment of All North's contract to include services during construction of the Carter Road Bridge.
I'm sorry I didn't let Patrick know I was going to ask these questions because I got rushed this morning. The original proposal from All North, which I'm just reading from a sentence on the closet, included a provisional cost for services during construction. but excluded environmental services. So I can understand the contract being increased for environmental services. But then it's on to say All North's total proposed fees for services during construction are 64,817. So obviously we've already spent the provisional cost that they had in their contract. Because you're wanting an extra 64,817.
64,817 is the full cost of services during construction, including environment.
So, but the original proposal included a provisional cost for services during construction.
Right, but we didn't award that part.
Ah,
We only awarded
that.
the design fees.
okay,
It was 70 something thousand.
all right, that was missing from it.
Sorry.
Okay, that answers that question. So I'll move that council direct staff to amend the contract for All North Consultants Limited by $64,817 to provide services during construction of the Carter Road Bridge.
Seconded by Councillor Saunders. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
You're now muted.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. And item 4.4, amendment of ISL design contract for the Cross Island multi-use path. Over to you again, Councillor Morse.
Well, the reason I pulled this one is what I've been saying all along, that we could build most of the rest of the path with what we're going to spend for the Charlie's Lane bit. And therefore, and I'm much happier to build the rest of the path and do Charlie's Lane last and put signage up and share the road with bikes and tell people they've only got to do it for 100 meters and so forth. So I pulled this so that I can vote against the recommendation.
So with that, let's get the motion on the table then. The council direct staff to amend the design contract for ISL by $43,586 to complete detailed design for the next section of the Cross Island multi-use path from Artisan Lane to Charlie's Lane. Moved by Councillor Fast. Seconded by Councillor Wake. Any discussion on this? Councillor Getty, followed by Councillor Saunders.
I have some problems with the multi-use path as a major focus and how expensive it is. And my preference is for more energy to be spent on transit. At the same time, we've spent so much, we are in this cycle in terms of getting grants, and I understand that we don't want to get ourselves out of the placemaking that we have with respect to those grants. But this is probably one of the most dangerous corners on the island. And whenever I've gone through it in the dark and the rain, and there's somebody all dressed in black pretending that they're ninjas or cat burglars or something, and you can't see them at all and they're on the road. There's other places on the other parts of the roads on the island that there's some wiggle room if you run into a problem. This corner, I think, is one of our very worst. And if we run out of money for the multi-use paths for the rest of the island, we might be able to manage, from my perspective, if we had a better bus system. But in terms of multi-use paths from the Cove to Artisan Square and then around that corner to Grafton, where the developer has another section up to Harding Road, that's a nice chunk of multi-use path that I think would stand us in really good stead, hopefully for a very, very long time. So I am not 100% sold on a multi-use path as an amenity, but I think in this case, mostly because of the cost, but I think in this case, I would be in favor of getting this chunk done.
Thank you, Councillor Getty. Councillor Saunders.
Thank you. Kind of ditto, except not completely. I'm reluctant. Well, first of all, I think the focus on this has been and the cost, and this is where I certainly agree with Councillor Getty. It's really expensive. I'm not necessarily sure how well it would get used. How many people actually were going across Island? And I recognize the community's interest in having this done and I think our own interest in kind of moving projects forward and, you know, the grant process and everything else, but I'm kind of, when I said ditto, the other ditto was for Council Morris, that I'd rather get things done that we can get done sooner. And I'd be more inclined to say, let's start at the other end. And we've had this discussion before, and I believe I've made the same comment as let's do what we can when we can. And as we raise money for the rest of it, then we'll get to that and link it up at the end as long as the last spike is like together instead of apart kind of thing. But anyway, so I'm probably, I'm inclined to vote against this motion as a result of that, as I'd rather see us get it moving from the other side and that probably better investment of the funds at this point.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Councillor Fast.
Thank you, and hello, everybody. I'm going to speak in favor of this amendment, but first I've got a question for the Director of Engineering, if I may. I'm wondering about the amount in the recommendation for the 43,586. Is that all from the Bowen budget, or are there grant funds supporting that?
No, it's also grant supported to about 75%. That cost would be recoverable from grant money.
Thank you. So it looks to me like this is really about $14,000 or something like that, or less?
Something like that in terms of cost to the municipality.
Thank you. And so that seems to me like a reasonable amount to tackle what Councillor Getty called the dangerous corner. This is a project that citizens and committees have been working on along with the municipality for about 25 years. I think since maybe even before it was a municipality. No, I think just after. There was an attempt to create a cross island pathway on the shoulders. And at that time, a short video was made. I'm happy to send anybody a link to that because the same issues are there today. As the cars zoom by in the background, parents are trying to take their kids to school, pulling trailers on with their bicycle. Those kids are all grown up now, but there are new children that still need to get to school. And there were walkers and people with strollers and horse riders, and but basically all kinds of different users, including people who were really concerned about the safety of others. And this is a long-term project on our small island. It's been identified for a long time. And here we're looking at 25% of the cost coming from municipal coffers for that 43,000 number that's in the recommendation. And I think it's time we tackled this dangerous corner, or at least the approach to it. It's all in phases. And I think in order to make grant funding available for the next stages too, that we should keep this project going. So I'm in favor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Fast. I am in favor of the recommendation. My support comes from one, the previous discussions we've had at council, and I know that we've already approved the alignment of the multi-use path. We've already approved staff to go out and secure grant funding related to the path. I know I have some concerns around the municipal contribution and the funding of that. However, in terms of the Charlie's Lane piece and what we've approved so far, where I am encouraged is that we've approved funding all the way to Grafton Lake. And I believe that that covers off some of the busiest stretches of road, given the Art Renison Nature Reserve that's going to be coming to the area, given the popularity of that we're going to be seeing from residents and off-island visitors. I think that having a continuous path directly from the ferry all the way to Grafton Lake is a positive move. as well. I believe that from Grafton Lake to Harding Road is covered from a developer contribution afterwards. So that gives us a good stretch of road that's doable in this term. And the conversations about what comes after that and funding what comes after that, I think is, for me, up in the air. But as it stands, given this specific recommendation, based on what council has approved already, and based on it, given that it's only about a $14,000 contribution from the municipality to do the design work for the section that Charlie's saying, I am supportive of that. Councillor Saunders, or Councillor Wake, and then Councillor Saunders.
I second your comments, Mayor Leonard. I think we've already done a fair bit of work on this. It's been back and forth on a number of pieces. We do have funding. The design work is underway. It seems progressive to stop that and start something else. And I agree with you. This will ultimately get us right to Harding Road and in the foreseeable future. And so I'll be in support of the motion.
Councillor Saunders?
Yes, thank you. I guess my only thought was, like, I agree that I'm not going to try and say $14,000 isn't a lot of money, because then, as we know, everything's a lot of money right now. But I just want to make sure that we're not at this point saying that, okay, moving ahead with the detailed design doesn't commit us to, like we haven't signed a construction contract or anything on those lines. We're still building where we're going. And if is that an accurate statement at this point? Like, are we, by moving ahead with this design, are we committing ourselves to anything beyond this design? The change in price for the added design?
I think that's a fair question. I'll look to staff for any comment on that.
There's no commitment to constructing anything at this point. And we do have grant funding secured for some of the construction cost. So if we were to not proceed with construction, then there would be a question mark around that grant funding. Okay, if we didn't have, we could ask and potentially get approval to direct that grant funding somewhere else. We would need to advance more or less from scratch at another location. Go that route.
What we're talking about now is simply the design portion. Right now. Okay, thank you.
It's a prerequisite to doing any construction, but it's not.
Understood, yeah.
It's not a commitment.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no further questions, comments, or debate. I will call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, raise your hand, say nay.
Nay.
Motion carries with Councillor Morse opposed. And that concludes the items for the consent agenda. Moving on to, thank you very much for being here, Mr. Graham. Item 6, business arising from minutes. 6.1, overview of provincial legislation on housing. We have Daniel Martin, our manager of planning and development, joining us here today.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me just start my presentation. So I'm here today to give you just an overview of some recent provincial legislation and leading from that, some action that will be required of the municipality in response. So this last fall, fall 2023, the province adopted a series of bills that have combined quite a significant impact on housing and land use planning in the province. So the first one we've talked about before at this table, but this is Bill 35, short-term rental accommodations, which is about strengthening tools, supporting local government enforcement of short-term rental bylaws, and establishing provincial regulation of short-term rentals. There are no actions that are required from the municipality as a result of this legislation. There are a few that may consider increasing fines, changing how we do data collection and data sharing. And then the one I've noted that's already underway is considering changes to the principal resident requirement. And I have a link there to our project page for that. And there's a survey available for those. Anyone listening who would like to complete our survey, please do so. It's open until the first week of March. The next one, so this one is just by far the most significant. It's Bill 44, the Housing Statutes Residential Development Bill. There's a series of changes in the legislation. So the first being, five changes. The first one being requiring secondary suites, accessory dwelling units in all residential zones. And we'll have a report coming to council on that piece. The second one would be small scale multi-unit housing, which is the idea that municipalities would have to allow 3 or 4 units on a lot. In the zoning, that one's not applicable to Bowen because of our size. We're less than 5,000 population. It's not applicable to us. The next one being public hearings. So this, you'll see a change in some recent applications we've received, and that municipalities are now prohibited from holding public hearings for residential rezoning applications that are consistent with official community plans. So previously, recently, municipalities had a choice to consider whether or not to hold a public hearing, and prior to that, municipalities were required to hold a public hearing. So we've done a complete change in that. Specific to rezonings that are consistent with the OCP. Obviously, applications to amend the OCP would still have the public hearing requirement. There's a change to the housing needs report. So previously, local governments had to do a housing needs report that showed the 5-year projected housing need. And that's been changed to show the 20-year projected housing need. And then flowing from that then is a requirement to update an OCP to show that you can deliver the 20-year projected housing need, and then that you update the land use bylaw to again include 20 years of projected housing needs. That's quite a change from before. Before, council had to consider the housing needs report in adopting the official community plan, but there wasn't an outright requirement that you include that number in your update. And especially then the change for the land use bylaw, so that your land use bylaw has to be updated to match the OCP is another significant change. It's just the same thing going over when those actions are required. So the secondary suite one has to be done quite quickly. So by June, so we have a staff report coming to the next council meeting to outline that. Housing needs report by the end of December. What's called an interim housing needs report. So it's not the full update, but it would be like a sort of short update report. And then we've been in talk with some consultants about commissioning that work, knowing that's importance for the OCP process as well. And then changes to OCP and land use bylaw by 2025. Bill 46 outlines changes to development financing. So it adds items that local governments can charge DCCs or development cost charges for, so including fire protection, solid waste recycling facilities. And then it creates something called an amenity cost charge, which would function similar to a DCC. And they have a list again of things that could be set up through an amenity cost charge. So community users, senior center, recreation athletic facilities, libraries, daycares, public squares. And sort of implied in that too is the province, depending on which sort of speaker you hear on it, it's like, is it imposing a change for local governments or, strongly suggesting? So moving away from negotiated amenities at time of rezoning. So this bill combined with the change to the land use bylaw has to be updated to match the OCP. So it's saying moving away from rezonings to match the OCP with amenities negotiated as a part of that process, but instead saying local governments, you have to do this all at once. You have to set out a zone for your housing need, and then you should have an amenity cost charge that then seeks amenities that are just a set rate that happen with each subdivision, each building permit, or each development, as opposed to when somebody comes for a rezoning. Bill 47 then outlines transit-oriented areas. This requires municipalities designate transit-oriented development areas near transit hubs. No areas are identified on Bowen, so this one, there's no action required for Bowen. And then finally, I just tried to highlight some of the required timelines of when changes have to happen. So the first one's actually the optional piece, but it's deciding whether or not to opt into the principal residence requirements of the short-term rentals. But the other ones are all required deadlines. So by the end of June, we have to amend our land use bylaws to permit secondary suites and or detached secondary suites on every property that permits single family homes. By January 1st, 2025, we need to receive an updated interim housing needs report, projecting 20 years of housing need. By December 31st, 2025, update the OCP to include housing required in the housing needs report. And that same date as well, update the land use bylaw to align with the land use designations in the OCP. And then December 31st, 2028, complete a new housing needs report, so a full report. And so the recommendation from staff is to refer this report to the Advisory Planning Commission and the Housing Advisory Committee for information. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Appreciate the work that your department is doing, given this raft of legislative amendments that I think has come somewhat of a surprise from the province, although we knew that they were signaling that it's coming. And I just want to recognize that that's created a lot of work for all municipalities across the province, both large and small. And I know that our municipality is no exception as we process and grapple and figure out how to implement these changes, particularly given the timeline that you've laid out so clearly. So thank you for that. With that, I'll open it up to the floor for council for questions. Councillor Wake.
Thank you, Mayor Leonard. I've got a couple of questions. The first one is I'm a little confused about the principal residence requirement and whether it applies to the owner or it could also apply to the host. In a lot of the language, it refers to the host must be living on it must be the principal residence of the host. Can an owner put a host there as the principal resident and therefore meet the requirement?
Through the chart, and I think that would be similar to like if an owner of a property is renting it to a tenant who is then, operating it as a short-term rental, right? That would be their principal residence.
Yeah.
That would be permitted. Yeah, I mean, through our business licensing, we require that the owner approve of, the tenant's business license application.
Right.
But it would be permitted.
And the tenant would apply for the business license.
Yeah, they would be operating in the short term.
My second question is for the housing needs report, is the province offering any funding to help us with that? And is it possible that Metro Vancouver is part of their regional housing needs reports? I think I've seen numbers from over the past from Metro, so I'm just wondering if we can get some help with that.
So through the chair, we have received funding. The province has funded every local government set formula, and I believe we received around $168,000 funding to implement these changes. There has been some talk. I've talked with both the Islands Trust and Metro Vancouver about the idea of can we have are there synergies in having some consultant do the interim housing needs report for multiple jurisdictions? I know the challenge that I've faced is that the deadline's the end of the year. And so for some communities, that means okay, we'll make sure it's done by then. And my goal is to have it done more quickly, knowing that it's sort of a basis for some of the OCP work. So I don't want to go into the OCP work and say, well, we'll have to accommodate some amount of housing, but we don't actually know what it is. I'd like to have that as soon as possible for the steering committees to set a framework of this is what has to be included in the OCP. Yeah. So possible, but maybe not.
Thank you.
Councillor Getty and then Councillor Fast.
A couple of questions on Bill 44. So with respect to the small scale multi-unit housing, that would only be a concern once we reach the 5,000 population and only in Snug Cove because it's the only area that has a sewage treatment plant. So the little lots that are, I've sort of translated the square meters, 280 square meters into square feet, and that's about 3,000 square feet. So 100 by 30. Those are all the little lots that are up the south side of Government Road. So this is, if anybody that owns those lots wanted to put in, redeveloped, that there would be 3 units must be permitted as of right. And it's without a public hearing, and we have to amend our bylaws to allow it. Is that what this legislation is telling us?
Yes. I guess with the caveat that like the small lots in Snug Cove already permit multi-dwelling units.
Up to 3 units?
So I'm in the village commercial zone, like along Long Island Trunk Road. Like where the commercial development is now permits multiple dwellings within each of those lots.
Not that many.
There's no unit cap, it's just based on floor area. It would affect things like Catesville or
This would likely be an increase.
Foxglove. Yes, there would be.
Now, if there were that development and these development cost charges and amenity charges or whatever, if that is triggering an increase in the sewage district, are they able to trigger that cost to the whole district? If somebody wanted to, is mandated to be able to develop, and we have a sewage district that doesn't have the capacity?
I know it's a question for me partly because that provision, the small scale multi-unit housing, there is an ability for local governments to request an extension because of infrastructure challenges like we have with the sewer system. But it's sort of timed around, right now, if you're over 5,000 population, this applies to you, you have to have it in place by June. And then there's a provision to extend it and say, okay, if you don't have I forget what the timeline is to extend it, but it's not super long. You have to have a plan. Say, we can't accommodate it in our sewer system now. Here's our plan to get there. And then you can seek an extension. But then it says it applies, if you're over 5,000 in a census period. So hypothetically, if next census or the census after Bowen is over 5,000, there's not timelines in the legislation of saying, okay, when the census report is over 5,000, you have to update it by X period. And, so it's not clear to me how that would work.
If I may, my understanding was that regional districts in the Islands Trust had been specifically exempt from the legislation. So you're saying that that may not be the case? And I'm particularly looking at, in this case, on the secondary suites and accessory dwelling units. So if we have to change our bylaws to allow use and density to accommodate one or both of the following on all of our lots, is that, because we are part of the trust, is that something that we have to comply with?
Yes, so it is something that I've had calls with the Islands Trust and the province about and had confirmed that yes, that applies to us. We're a municipality, so it exempts Islands Trust areas, but then it explicitly includes municipalities, and we're captured under municipalities, so it does apply to us.
But it's then an argument in terms of whether or not, because it's a conflict with our the trust mandate in terms of trying to maintain rural. And this is quasi-urban density.
Yeah, I
Is it
mean,
a potential argument?
I've had talks again with the Islands Trust and the province specifically about, it's a secondary suite one, and then partly too, I'm thinking of the change to the land use bylaw to comply with the OCP is just sort of alerting the province and the Islands Trust to the fact that for us to do a rezoning bylaw, we would have to show compliance with the trust statement and concerns about potential conflict. In particular, I think it's 5.2.5 that talks about the growth rate of, and saying, okay, if we have to do it's one thing for the secondary suite bylaw, it's maybe has a bit more than the bylaw change to the land use bylaw to comply with the OCP. Saying I don't yet know what that 20-year number is. But if we were in a bylaw even today that said, well, we're going to match the zoning to our current OCP, it would be a fairly significant change. The Islands Trust would rightfully want, quite a lot of support, supporting documentation and whatever else to show we considered all the Islands Trust policy statement pieces and potential conflict of saying, well, our answer is just the province says we have to do it. Where does that happen? Well,
Might come and pick your brains more later.
Sure. Councilor Getty, Councilor Fast, followed by Councilor Morris. You are muted, Councilor Fast.
Thank you. Thank you, Planner Martin. I think you've answered some of my questions. My main question is about the previous slide. You talked about December 31st, 2005, update the land use bylaw to align with the land use designations in the OCP. Is that only for housing, or is that for all of the land use designations, including things like watershed or environmental protection? Is it just for housing or for everything?
Through the trend, that's an interesting question. I don't know if I could answer it offhand. I know that it definitely is for sort of housing and residential development, and I might have to look into it more about other pieces.
Okay, thank you. That's one of the things that I'm concerned about. I appreciate the need for diverse and attainable housing. It's needed. I think we can do it with nature. I just don't want the environment to be secondary. And I just wanted to, for those who weren't at the who weren't at the Local Government Leadership Academy, one of the things that Bill Buchholzer said, and he's he's a lawyer for municipalities and local governments and also a planner. Anyway, he characterized this, like Planner Martin did, as a very significant change. He called, this was 44, 46, and 47, as the most significant change in land use since the Islands Trust and the Agricultural Land Reserve were formed. And his natural environment appears to be secondary to the 20 years of residential province-wide. And he also said that he wasn't sure that the current across-the-board approach will endure. He mentioned the Islands Trust specifically. So there may be changes coming, but I'm very interested in this, and thank you for your report. How interesting.
Thank you, Councillor Fast. Councillor Morse.
I'm trying to remember what I wanted to say. So the secondary suites and accessory dwelling units isn't going to be much of a change because it's mostly already allowed in most areas in the island. The opting into the short-term rentals, if we don't opt in this year, there's still an option to opt in at a later date. It's not now or never. Yeah, I had the similar question about sewer capacity and that kind of thing. And then the other is just the, I guess I call it the ACC, the accommodation.
Amenity.
Yeah. We're going to have to do that. Otherwise, we're not going to get any money. I mean, because right now we've been getting amenities in the way of things being provided when we changed the land use bylaw to match the OCP for that particular zoning. So we're definitely going to have to do that, or we won't be accessing any amenities. But parkland doesn't appear to be an amenity, is that? Yeah. So, and it doesn't, can we use that for sewer and water?
Yes.
Doesn't those ACCs?
Through the chair, you would have a DCC for sewer and water.
Yeah, okay. Because sometimes it's maybe easier for the ACC when they're doing a big.
But not everybody will necessarily have a DCC.
Yeah.
So everybody will be required to have ACC. Sorry.
Sure. Anyhow, it's just
there's some of the details still need to be ironed out, but not everybody's required to have a DCC, and so there'll be communities that only have the ACC.
Yeah.
And they haven't. I don't think they provided an exhaustive list of what is eligible for ACCs.
I mean, I'll just add, I guess it's local governments aren't required to have an ACC, they can choose to.
Yeah.
So many will likely choose. And then another thing, so parkland provision and also the provision of affordable housing is something that's come up a lot, that many communities, that's what we saw solutions for. And the province did say in some of their webinars that they're looking to bring changes in the spring. So we're sort of monitoring that as well of what they may be thinking in terms of future changes. So there may be another report like this.
My understanding is that the province is still releasing policy guidance on some of these bills, which is long and extensive and exhaustive, and
correct. Yes.
Okay, and the devil's in the details, so I get the nod that you're still processing that within the planning department, like most municipalities. So given that this is just a motion to refer at this point, I know that we're going to have conversations about short-term rentals. This is going to come back to us after the Advisory Planning Commission, the Housing Committee, and I think it would behoove, I love the word behoove, it's best to have a larger conversation about some of these pieces after we get that committee feedback as well as the results of the short-term rental piece. I have questions about that one, that, given that that's in the public sphere right now, and that there is the consideration to opt in or not, as well as just how it fits with our existing classifications and whether we do need to make some changes to RGAs versus B&Bs, and then the sort of knock-on effects that has on new developments on the island for folks that sometimes rip out kitchens to make them a B&B, or constructing places that could be effectively be suites and not putting kitchens in them just to get around some of the rules that we have. Councillor Getty, and then I'll look for a motion.
Oh, you want the recommend? I was going to move the recommendation.
Awesome. Yeah, go ahead. Councillor Fast.
Just before we do the motion, I wondered if, with regard to these changes and what it might mean to Bowen Island to move this big movement in the direction of housing, whether it might also be good to refer to the Environment and Climate Action Committee so that we can have early thinking about how it can be done. So we still have healthy ecosystems that aren't so fire prone, and collect water for all those of us that are on wells, and so that we continue to be able to live in a sustainable ecology on Bowen. So I'm wondering if the mover might consider adding the Environment and Climate Action Committee to that. Otherwise, I can do an amendment later. Thank you.
Also getting for the motion.
Council refer the overview of provincial legislation on housing report dated January the 24th, 2024 to the Advisory Planning Commission, the Housing Advisory Committee, and the Environmental and Climate Action Committee for information.
By Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Wake. Any discussion?
Do we want it to come back with a report?
So the motion as it reads now, it's going to these committees for information. I'll leave it up to the individual committees to make their own dispositions as to what they'd like to do with that information, and whether they'd like to go as far as making a recommendation. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye, in favor.
Thank you, Councillor Jurgensen, and that carries unanimously. Moving on to 7.1, introduction to an application for an amendment to the official community plan and rezoning for 883 Hummingbird Lane. Back over to you, Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is an application received to amend the land use bylaw and the official community plan for property at 883 Hummingbird Lane, located here on the east coast of Bowen. The property itself is designated as rural residential in our official community plan with bracket E. So seeking an average lot size of 0.4 hectares or 1 acre, and a minimum lot size of 0.2 hectares or half an acre, provided they're served by community water system. And the property is located in our SR2 zone, our settlement residential 2 zone, requires a minimum lot size of 0.2 hectares and requires a minimum average lot size of 0.4 hectares. I'll just note that something I get a lot of questions about sometimes people find confusing. So a subdivision has to comply with both the minimum lot size and the minimum average lot size. So to make within the zoning, to make a 2-lot subdivision, you would need 0.8 hectares or about 2 acres. Of land, so that the average lot size is 0.4, but one lot can be smaller and one larger. So the application is to rezone this property to permit subdivision into 2 lots, each 0.2 hectares or half acre in size. And so what's shown here is proposed subdivision plan showing the proposed lot A and lot B, each being just over 0.2 hectares in size. So we have a zone variation, that's the SR2C zone. There's a zone variation that doesn't require the 0.4 hectare minimum average lot area and just has a 0.2 minimum lot size. So staff recommend this application be referred to 3 advisory committees to discuss elements of the application in more depth. So the Advisory Planning Commission, the Housing Advisory Committee, and the Parks, Trails, Greenways Advisory Committee, then return to council with those committee recommendations. My report has some discussion about elements of the application, so I'm happy to go into those with council, or respecting your time, you prefer to go to the committees first. And then as an alternative to, I flagged that council has recently established the terms of reference for an OCP steering committee to oversee a review of Welland's OCP. So it's sort of an open question at the staff level. Council may wish to defer consideration of individual OCP amendments until a new OCP has been established. So I flag it in the report that we've received this application. I have another similar application that may be coming before you shortly that will have a similar question in terms of deferment or not. But the staff recommendation is that this application be referred to those 3 advisory committees for recommendation and direct staff to refer back with the results of the proposal.
Thank you. Any questions for the planner? Councillor Morse?
Just not clear on the map, and I'm trying to find it in the report. How are they going, oh, there's a road that, is this the one that they were wanting to?
It's adjacent. This is, through the chair, this is the south side of that municipal road.
So that is a municipal road that's drawn through there, so.
On the north side of the property.
Yeah, so there's no issue with access to either lot.
Correct, both lots would have legal access.
Thank you, Councillor Morse, Councillor Getty, and then Councillor Fast.
In the figure 3 site plan, details of the application subject property, it's listed there as approximately 0.61 hectares. Is that, and all the rest talks about 0.41.
Yeah.
The first line under
No, so it would be, it's a 0.4 hectare lot.
and is this the property that, not too long ago, a couple of meetings, they were asking for a municipal community to sell them the, right of way that was north of it?
No, through the chair, this is the property on the south side of that municipal road, and the property that had the letter to council is on the north side of that same road.
Okay.
Councillor Fast? You are also on mute.
Sorry. Thank you. I'm just wondering if council is to take this on with the staff time for it. Are there any benefits to the community happening through this work that the municipality would take on for this? Like, would there be any new housing result, or what benefit could come to the community from this one-off rezoning?
Through the chair, often I leave it up to sort of council to determine community benefit. I mean, I think the applicants would say the benefit is having, an additional lot able to be subdivided and create more housing on Welland. There aren't specific amenity contributions identified at this point with this application.
Oh, so excuse me, do follow up. Do you mean that if it was subdivided and it created a separate lot, that separate lot could then have a detached secondary suite and a suite in it?
That's correct. If it was subdivided into 2 lots, each lot could have a house with a secondary suite.
Okay, thank you. And then when we get to discussion, I've got some more. Thank you.
My only comments on this one, I have no issue referring this to public notice. I know that this property just in my reading of this report, stretches the definition of residential in my mind, given that it's one dwelling is already a 4-unit Airbnb and the other dwelling is being used as a residential guest accommodation. So in that, it just piques my interest as to what the long-term plans for both subdivided properties are going to be. And I would encourage the applicant to perhaps, unless you have it, provide some rationale for what it is that eventually is going to happen with those two properties, and whether we're going to have two adjacent lots that continue to stretch the definition of residential, given the short-term vacation rental use in here that appears to be effectively a small commercial hotel at this point. So that would be my encouragement to the applicant. Councillor Fast with recommendation or further question or discussion?
A bit more discussion. I remember, I mean, this is a designed official community plan. It's not just arbitrary lines on a map. And the whole design of this subdivision is there to create a rural resident or the residential neighborhood. The style, the all kinds of design decisions have gone into where those lines are on the map. And I remember early on, I wasn't on council, but there was one earlier lot that was subdivided, and that was at the very end there. And what resulted from that was September Morn beach access, a much wider beach access. And that was thought to be a benefit to the community. And the other side of that equation was a question of hardship. Was there hardship? That was part of the what I remember as what council was considering at the time for that particular landowner. And so that OCP is a design to meet the community goals. The lines on the map are there for a reason. The land use bylaw has those lines for a reason. It's not arbitrary. In general, I'm opposed to one-off proposals like this because they take a lot of staff time and council time and committee time even when we've got such huge changes like we just discussed above on the table, as well as our own official community plan and all the other work that council has taken on and staff are involved in. And so I don't think we should take any action at all on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fast. With that, I'll look to council for a disposition or a motion on this piece of business.
Audio now unmute.
I so move.
Is that moving the recommendation, Councillor Jurgensen?
Audio now unmuted.
Can I get the recommendation read just to make sure?
Sure. The recommendation is that council refer application OCP RZ 02-2021 to the Advisory Planning Commission, Housing Advisory Committee, Parks, Trails and Greenways Advisory Committee for a recommendation and direct staff to refer back with the results of the referrals.
Audio now unmuted.
I'm happy to move that, though I'd like to add that I think it would be beneficial to put a pause on any OCP amendments until the new official community plan is output.
Okay, I'm parsing that in my mind as so the recommendation is to refer the application for the OCP amendment to the committees, but then also not take any action on an OCP amendment.
On any further OCP amendments past this one. Since this one is presumably in the timeline or the pipeline for a little bit.
Okay, so we have, so just let me recap that here. So the recommendation being moved is that council refer application as legally stated to the Advisory Planning Commission, Housing Advisory Committee, and Parks, Trails, and Greenways Advisory Committee for recommendation, and direct staff to refer back to with the results of the referrals, and to pause any future OCP amendment applications.
Audio now unmuted.
Correct. Something to the effect of, and that staff issue notice that the council direct staff to issue notice that no further OCP amendments will be issued until the new OCP is finalized.
Hang on a second. Motion's still being moved. It hasn't been seconded yet. I'm just going to look to our corporate officer to see how the wording is going.
So I've added on to the recommendation staff as moved by Councillor Jurgensen that any future OCP amendments not be considered until the official community plan is updated.
Audio now.
That sounds good to me. I'm willing to move that.
And I'll look for a seconder. So with no second, that motion does not come to the floor. Councillor Getty, followed by Councillor Wake.
The third option, the third alternative, that council directs staff to not pursue the proposal any further or until there's amendments and a review of the official community plan.
Was that a motion, sir?
Okay, I'll move that. Council directs staff to not pursue the proposal any further. So we are review of the official community plan.
Audio now.
I'm willing to second.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Jurgensen. Any discussion on this? Councillor Getty to the motion.
I think it's fairly complicated, and I think that it's a one-off that could have be of interest to other landowners. And I think that it's something that is fundamental to all the discussions we have to have around our official community plan. So rather than have a whole lot of discussion on this and probably change all that discussion get into the official community plan, I think is a poor use of everybody's time.
Okay, Councillor Getty, Councillor Wake, and then Councillor Morse.
So I'm in agreement. I think there's enough reasons to not proceed with this because of the uncertainties around what is going to happen with short-term rental legislation. And I don't see how this is contributing to our housing problem or our wanting to have residential neighborhoods that actually have Owen residents living in them. So I'm happy to see this change.
Thank you, Councillor Wake. Councillor Morse.
I was just looking at the alternative section of the report, and there's a comment in here that not at point, there's December 2023, apparently there was also a similar application for another area on the island to subdivide. And apparently there's been several meetings with other people who wish to do the same thing. So I think, and again, with this housing legislation, I think we should, and because they applied in 2021, so I'm not quite sure why it's taken so long to get here. So I think there's lots more implications to this than just a one-off. So I think better to refer the whole discussion to the OCP update since we're in one anyhow.
Councillor Morse. Councillor Jurgensen.
Audio now unmuted.
I would just like to rescind my earlier motion that I had made. And I definitely agree that it's not worth pushing anything else forward. I understand that motion was defeated, but just for the record to show that I did rescind that.
Thank you. Councillor Fast.
Thank you. Could someone read the current motion that's been moved and seconded? I didn't catch it all. Thank you.
Yes, I'll have the corporate officer read that out.
It is that council directs staff to not pursue the proposal any further until the official community plan is updated.
Thank you.
This proposal or any proposals?
The proposal, but I could add in the application number.
Can we do that?
Yeah.
So we're kind of predicting the future here and saying there's going to be more of them and we're going to say no.
Gotcha. So,
What,
yeah, that's it. That's it.
motion read now?
Sure, I'll have the corporate officer read out the motion again, just for clarity.
So adding the application number, it's that council directs staff not to pursue the proposal OCP/RZ 02/2021 any further until the official community plan is updated.
Thank you.
Okay, Council Wake?
No, I'm confused. So is it any proposal like this, or is it just this proposal?
Just this proposal, the one that's listed.
Sorry, that's what I thought I was asking.
Mayor, if I may, just for a point of clarification, so in this particular instance, it is council's prerogative if they choose not to pursue it any further. They could choose not to pursue any applications any further. But there may be other applications that come forward that are of significant importance and value to council, regardless of the state of the OCP, to pursue.
And I understand that, but I thought I understood part of the recommendation or part of the motion was or any, but if that's not part of it, okay, then we're good, or I'm good.
I think I'm along the same lines. If council wishes not to pursue this specific application, given some of the information contained in the report, I can live by that decision. Where I get hesitant for preemptively saying that any application isn't something that we're going to consider is I think property owners and residents do and should have the opportunity to avail themselves to processes of land use and changing that land use, making any blanket decision about it that you just can't until we complete a very long OCP process and not allow us any wiggle room to consider those types of applications. I think that would be detrimental to both the interest of the island and unfair for the power process that residents are afforded.
And just one piece of history. I think the precedent that's being quoted in here was a very particular case. And there was some sort of hardship in providing, I just need to go back and check my recollection, but I'm fairly sure it was one that providing for the ability to have a senior stay in.
And with that, I will, Councillor.
I'll consider it a friend.
Well, no such thing as friendly amendments. We do it by an amendment or unanimous consent. But so let's read out the motion as it is, and then I'll call the question on it just to move us along here.
The council directs staff to not pursue the proposal OCP/RZ 02/2021 any further until the official community plan is updated.
Okay. I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Audio now
Aye.
muted.
And that carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Moving on to item 8.1 on island compost facility decision. Our manager of environment and parks planning, Carla Skews here.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks again. So I'm here to present the preliminary design for the on-island compost facility and to ask for direction from council on whether to proceed with the project. In terms of a background, I just want to recognize that on-island compost began as a community-driven initiative, and to give some credit to the many community members and community groups and committees of council that have worked on the project over a number of years. Since my department has been working on the project, we completed the feasibility study in 2020, and were awarded the Clean BC grant in 2021. In 2022, we realized our organics volumes had exceeded the capacity of the hot rot system that was recommended in the feasibility study. So we started looking at the Green Mountain Technologies system instead, which was recommended by the Compost Facility Working Group in 2015, so almost 10 years ago. And it was considered a viable alternative, and that's why council in last January approved the expenditure of $5,000 for the preliminary design work, which is what I'm presenting to you today. So we're looking at the Green Mountain Technologies Earthflow site built system. And Green Mountain is based in Washington. They have over 30 years in the composting business and have designed about over 400 composting facilities worldwide. They estimate that they have about 100 facilities of similar size to the one that we're setting up. But they do all kinds of work ranging from just small farms to facilities that process over 500 times what we would be processing. The system would be located inside a prefabricated building on a concrete pad at the Bowen Island Recycle Depot site. It would be capable of processing all of the island's food waste and yard waste, produce a usable soil amendment, and provide a closed loop solution for our organic waste. Another reason for doing the project is to reduce our GHG emissions. And of course, these are emissions associated with transportation to the mainland. So we can also expect to see a reduction in costs, savings with transportation costs, as well as cost savings from tipping fees. So this is the preliminary design. There's two buildings. One of them is fully enclosed, the one on the right. And then the other one is partially open. That's a storage building for curing. The basic process is for collections, it's basically the same. Everything gets collected on Wednesday. It's all amassed into a bin. And then on Thursday, an operator comes in and moves all those materials around. They go into the Earthflow. Just get my cursor. So the Earthflow system is right here. They stay there for 1 week and then they get moved into one of these 3 bays here. These are an ASP system, which I'll go into a little bit more after. They then stay there for 3 weeks, after which they would get moved outside to one of the curing bays. And the compost matures there. There's storage of finished compost here, and then this is storage of wood chips for use in the winter when we need more carbon-rich material and where we're collecting mostly just food waste. This middle part here is a biofilter. Just to get an idea of what the facility will look like, these are preliminary plans for the 2 buildings. They are mounted on a steel frame. They are covered with a vinyl fabric with large accordion doors for trucks to go in and out. And the fabric is fire rated, it's UV protected, and it's got a 15-year prorated warranty, but expected to last about 20 to 25 years. This is a close-up of the system here. So the auger here moves back and forth and side to side through the compost. And then we have some control panels on the side. I don't know if you see the mouse there. The control panels are here. This is part of the biofilter system. So it pulls air through here and comes out the biofilter here. So the air is being pushed through a medium that's kind of cleaning the air and making it smell good. Underneath the ASP pile, so ASP stands for aerated static pile. Pipes that are below the piles here shoot air through the compost. They're installed below grade so that trucks can pass over them, but they're not in the ground, they're in the floor. And so those are automatically controlled by temperature, so they only turn on at a certain temperature. ASP is a very basic compost technology. It's been around since the 70s and has been an industry standard for over 40 years. The most important thing about it is just that it prevents the compost piles from going anaerobic, which is good for a number of reasons, but mostly just because an anaerobic compost pile would smell bad. Of course, some odors are inevitable, but that's why we have the biofilter. So this is just a screenshot from a facility in Bainbridge in Washington, just so you can see what it looks like in real life. The control panel is up front here. And then these are the walls that the auger is mounted on that goes back and forth through. This one is installed in a food building. Our building would be larger with like a bigger steel frame, but then there's storage on either side. And then here I've just layered this basic site plan over an ortho photo of the site. And it's just to show you how, give you a basic idea of where the facility is going on the site and the scale of the facility in comparison with the other operations there. The area is currently undeveloped and shouldn't interfere with any of the current operations of the site. Okay, so this table I presented last January, and I wanted to show it again just so that you can see how the capital cost estimate has changed. The original estimate for the hot rot that was used to apply for the Clean BC Organics Infrastructure Grant, which covers the 2/3 of the capital cost, we were approved for up to 1.019 million. So that's why when the price of the hot rod system was updated, the grant amount stayed the same, but the borrowing would have gone up to 1.3 million. So it didn't make economic sense to continue with the project as proposed. So we put together a rough estimate before starting work on the preliminary design with Green Mountain. It was low. The difference in cost from last January to now can be attributed mostly to 3 things. Lock blocks is one. We needed more than anticipated, and the cost of those can increase significantly. Site prep as well, because we're using a different part of the site, which makes more sense. It's a better use of the site, but it will involve more work and more materials than anticipated. And again, the costs have gone up significantly. And then the last thing is the upgrades to the system. So the double auger and additional ASP system were not included in the original quote. One other thing is the project contingency was also low previously because such a huge chunk of it was just on one single item. That was the hot rod system. So we've increased the contingency to 25%, which is more reasonable for a Class C estimate. So with a project budget of 1.64 million, the municipal contribution is around 520,000. And that would need to be borrowed through an equipment financing loan from the Municipal Finance Authority. Given the letter that council received from the NICNAC note last night, it appears that we may need to borrow a further $100,000 from the MFA. So that would increase our payments by around 20%. Construction is set to be completed in early 2025. So if the intention is to release the funds at that point, they can be used to pay back the principal on the loan. So at current interest rates, the cost to borrow is approximately $120,000 per year. Factoring in the estimated savings in transportation and tipping fees, the operating costs, and the sales of finished compost, the net cost of the facility is expected to be around $40,000 per year for the first 5 years. This would translate to an additional tax increase of 0.6%. And then once the debt is repaid, cost savings are expected to be around $70,000 per year. Or if we reallocated the climate action funds to this project, we could see those cost savings in after 3 years. So the recommendation, staff is asking for direction. So the recommendation is either to direct staff to proceed with preparing the RFP for engineering, procurement, and construction of the facility, or that council direct staff to indefinitely postpone the project and inform the province of the decision to cancel the approved grant.
Thank you. Before we get a recommendation on the table, I'll look to council for any questions. Councilor Morse?
Just looking at the January 23rd report. So am I understanding you to say, and I didn't read that into the correspondence that we got from NICNAC late last night, that they're not willing to advance the 100,000 right now?
My understanding is that they would like to wait until the facility is constructed or nearing final phase of construction before they would release the funds.
And so we would, so does that, why does that increase the amount we're going to borrow other than you're saying it's uncertain that we would get?
So when we take the loan out, it has to be in one lump sum. So in order to cover that portion, we would have to increase the borrowing amount.
And that's just to be safe in case we didn't get. And I guess my question in reading the letter, they're questioning whether our numbers are accurate for expenditures, that we've accounted for everything and things like that. Now, the last spreadsheet that I've got for accounting is a report dated back in 2021. Yeah, 2020. Costing. So that very brief shot you had, have you actually updated all the costs?
Yes.
So those rates are current rates?
Yeah, so
Am I missing a report, I guess is my question that had.
December 11th, 2023.
Okay, I've got a report dated December 2nd from Kristen. Don't have a December yet.
It was a report that went to the Finance Advisory Committee.
Yeah, I thought I'd seen one. Printed it off. It's in the finance file, I guess. All right, thank you.
Councilor Wake, and Councilor Saunders, followed by Councilor Fast.
Thank you.
Good.
I'm wondering about the what we're putting into this, and you mentioned that there's 100 of these in operation, but do they have a similar situation where they're putting both yard waste and composting in there? Is that sounds like a more difficult mix. Have they tested that?
So I have yet to find a facility that is, you know, working with the same feedstock on the same scale as we are. It's just not, they don't exist kind of thing, right? Everyone has a little bit of a different situation. A lot of the time, municipality will have more space. That's usually what happens, that they can do something like Windrose. It's difficult to find exactly the same situation. So the other Green Mountain facilities, the only one I found that is working with exactly the same feedstocks is in Powell River. Unfortunately, it shut down recently, but I did get a chance to visit it before it was shut down. And they were running at about 900 tons a year, which is around more than what we would run out. We would start probably around 700. And yeah, that's exactly what they had. It was it was a pilot project for them. And it was yard waste, food waste mixed together. And it seemed to be working quite well and on a similar footprint.
Thank you.
Councillor Morris, I'm going to move you to the end.
I remember looking.
There's an order.
Sorry.
There's an order. Councillor Saunders.
Oh, okay.
Councillor
Sorry,
Fast,
sorry.
Councillor Getty, Councillor Morris.
Thank you. Just in the estimate numbers that you provided us there, thanks for that. Given the Knick-Knack letter from last night, and you did indicate, so that would raise the cost a bit. What's a bit? Or do you have, is there some sense it just, you know, a lot or a bit?
Well, so it says the it is about 20%. So we would have to borrow 620,000 instead of 520,000. I believe the intention is to release the funds later. So in the end, it probably wouldn't matter. Our payments go up, but if we can pay back
And you can pay
the
it back.
principal, then it's okay.
There seems to be a lot of these going on, though, I'm concerned. Okay, that's fine, that's an answer for me.
I just was seeking, seeking clarification.
I understand.
Understand. But
I understand.
that's as far as we've gotten. I mean, the letter came in pretty late, so.
No, I understand that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Councillor Fast.
Thank you. I'm delighted to see this in front of council again. I like the timeline at the beginning. I know so much work has gone into this by so many people in the community before it even came to council. And as one of the people who was on the on-island composting working group for years and grinding through the numbers again and again to make sure that they were going to work. I'm delighted to see it here in and that the Knick-Knack Nook has $100,000 that they're willing to put into it in spite of last minute concerns, I guess. I want to just some of my interest in doing this. When I first moved to Bowen Island over 30 years ago, there was a lively recycling depot. And that, of course, is still going on. When I first joined council at my first, what's it called? The UBCM, the Union of BC Municipalities meeting. Another councillor and I went and talked to the province in terms of what grants could be available. Well, Bowen Island wasn't eligible because people already were diverting so much green waste. We're kind of ahead of the curve. And here it feels like we're finally ready to build the on-island composting in order to onshore our green waste and lawn waste and yard waste and turn it into something that's more zero waste, more self-sufficient, more closed loop, more circular. And I'm delighted with this. It's also one of the big climate moves is composting facilities. That's one of the things that the Community Energy Association promotes as for all cities and communities. I'm have been following that carefully as well, as I'm interested in the climate action side of that. Regenerative, not extractive, good for the financial sense. It seems to me that this is something that could be bring a return on investment in 5 years, if not more, if not sooner. As we've just heard, maybe 3 if the Knick-Knack Nook comes through. It's better for equity. I think there's more people who could pick up soil and bring it home to use in their garden than there are people who drive a vehicle to the city and go shop at a garden center, which you really need a vehicle for. This seems to me to be more available to people to actually use for restoring soils, for putting more carbon into soils, for food security, growing food in their yards. And so with all of this, and a supplier that is nearby in Washington and who has been in conversation with Bowen Island folks for at least 10 years, and who has these different things, I would like to make the motion. So I'm going to make the motion now.
I'm going to clear the speaking order first.
Okay.
Just because everybody has their hand up, so I'd like to get any questions out before we begin a debate and discussion on that. So moving to Councillor Getty.
My recollection is that when this first came up years ago, that it was very exciting that Bowen could be at the forefront, and we could be an example, and we could bring in the technology that would, the circular economy and the sustainability and have it on site, and that we would, we were eligible and we got the grant, and that there was the generosity of the Knick-Knack Nook in terms of putting some seed money and impetus into this, and it was all very positive. And now, the kinds of questions in terms of one of the things that we did in our strategic plan was to make the decision that we were going to try and get through a lot of the problems that have already existed before we started getting into something new. And I'm feeling like this is just that, on the edge of being experimental, and we haven't had the same recipe going into we have to do a lot of education in terms of maybe getting people to ever use the yard paper bags again, and whether or not everybody is actually going to buy into buying the end product. I'm very careful about what I put into my garden, and it's generally my household waste. And from all the money that I spend at the ready, I probably have the most expensive compost on the island, but I don't buy bulk soil from many of the other sources, mostly because of processed foods, and I don't want it to be burnt, and I don't want a lot of wood in it. So,
Councillor Getty, I'm just going to jump in here, just for the sake of knowing that Councillor Fast was looking to make the motion, and that we're going to have discussion on the motion itself in just a minute, and when we have the manager here.
All right. So then,
just any questions?
Speeching.
Questions for the manager.
So my understanding is that some of the financial calculations have been based on staffing, and that there may or may not be problems that have been taken into consideration with respect to getting staffing and what we're going to have to pay them to keep them on the job or get them to move to Bowen. There's maybe some finessing and fine tuning that has to go into place and go into the calculations in terms of the equipment, and whether or not, in fact, we can just pull it out of the expense side, that a lot of it, at least some of it, maybe a lot of it is going to stay in terms of staffing and trucking, and that unless and until this gets completely off the ground and is running without any glitches, that there may still be dumping fees and some other costs, and that we're possibly being optimistic in terms of the amount of the soil that could be sold. So have all of those contingencies been taken into place, or are we looking at numbers that are too optimistic possibly.
Yeah, I think so. I tried to write everything down that you said. So I just wanted to say, so the reason the project didn't move forward earlier in the game is because the tipping fees were so low, on the mainland, that it really stalled the project because it just wasn't economically viable. At this point, we've seen tipping fees go up and up and up, and that happens every year. So it's kind of like the writing's on the wall. We know that they will continue to go up. So for us to do something here gives us a bit of security in terms of tipping fees. For being picky about compost and the product. So currently, to get a topsoil delivered to your home, it's about $225 a yard. So we are planning on selling the finished material for $15 a yard wholesale. So for any person who wanted to buy that and then process that material further, mix it with sand, screen it a couple of times, they're going to create a better product and they're going to be able to sell it for quite a bit more money. That's a pretty viable business for anyone who, has a bit of heavy equipment that could do that. I think that I spoke with one operator on the island who said that he sold more than what we produce in a year in the spring, each spring. So I don't think we'll have too much to be able to sell. I also think that I have some other people who are interested in taking it off our hands for free if there was ever an overage. Bags are allowed, the paper bags. There won't be a lot of education required for the community. The only thing that we need to change in terms of the collection system is that we don't want to allow sticks over 12 inches long. And that's just because they won't process really well in the system. However, if they get missed, and so we just wouldn't want to do the bundles of sticks. You just have to break them down a little bit more. If they do end up in the system though, it's not a problem. They just don't get processed, that's all. The staffing problem, I think staffing is a problem for everyone currently. So I don't think that's unique. I think that, I've tried my best to overestimate the staffing requirements. When we're at our full capacity, it should take one operator about 7 hours to process all of the waste in the facility. We've done calculations based on scoops and all of that. There's an additional 1 to 2 hours a month of maintenance, and then an additional 1 to 2 hours a month of chipping. So there might be a couple other small things that we haven't thought of, but currently I've estimated it at 0.5 of a full-time staff. But what I've just told you in terms of 7 hours a week, that's only about 0.25. So I really have doubled that. I don't know if there's anything else. Does that answer your questions?
Thank you. Over to Councilor Bernstein, Councilor Morris, and then myself.
Audio now.
Okay, just a question through the chair. Regarding the 100,000 contribution from the Nick Nack Nook, if they were to put that in the beginning, and release the funds, say now at the beginning of the project, would that 0.6% tax increase still need to happen, or is that irrelevant?
Yes, the numbers that were done with the 0.6 tax increase were done when we were under the impression that the Nick Nack funds would be released immediately.
Audio now.
Okay, so in follow-up, would that not then be a larger number than 0.6%, considering the letter from the Nick Nack Nook?
So I'm a little unclear at the moment, but I think that we would have to borrow a little bit, the $100,000 up front, and then the payments would increase over the next year. But as long as construction was complete on time as planned, then we should be able to contribute, and the NICAG releases those funds, then we should be able to use that money to pay off the principal of the loan.
Unmute audio.
Okay.
Audio now unmute.
Thank you, Councillor Jurgensen. Councillor Morris, I believe you have a follow-up.
Two questions. I'm following up on that last one. So we can pay off the equipment loans at any time with MFA?
You can pay down principal at any time with MFA, but your payments are fixed.
Audio.
So if they establish your 5-year equipment financing loan with monthly payments of $12,000, a portion of that goes to principal and interest. It just means your period that you'd be paying that monthly payment would shorten if you all of a sudden made $100,000 principal payment. But your monthly cost to carry it would be the same. It would just be for a shorter number of years.
So it's not, so the tax increase would be a little bit more than, because do you have any idea how much?
For 4 years instead of 5 years.
Is it 0.7, 0.8?
So an increase of 20% to 0.6, another 1.2, another 0.12, 7.2, 0.72.
And then looking back through my files and looking at the 2013, 2013, I think it was, reports, or 2016 reports from the working group. I thought the Green Mountain technology was used by Gibson.
Mm-hmm.
So they're still using it?
No, Powell River was using it. So the facility that I visited in Powell River actually bought the equipment from Gibson's.
Okay.
And they changed it a little bit, but that was the same equipment still in.
So that begs the other question then, why did Gibson's stop using the Green Mountain technology?
Well, I think that the operator was a private operator.
Yes, was a private operator.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. So just following up on that, and Powell Rivers concluded their pilot project, and are they going to be adopting it, or they chose not to use it?
No, so I believe I didn't find all of the information on what happened, but my understanding was I saw the operation right before they planned on doing an expansion. So it was just a pilot project that was running for a couple of years. They were right in the downtown core and had never received a complaint for any odors or anything else. But as soon as they were moving to the larger site, that once people kind of heard about it, that they were very, very concerned that it could potentially cause odors and a nuisance to the neighbors. And so the expansion got shut down.
Okay. So then how many municipalities in BC are currently using this system for their municipal waste?
I don't know offhand. I'm not sure that they are, to be honest. And but I do know that with the funding that we were receiving, the BC, the Clean BC Infrastructure Grant, there are 5 First Nations communities that are working on installing Green Mountain technology systems.
Okay. And then, so the output that comes out of it isn't topsoil?
It's not topsoil, no.
No. And what happens with any unsold output?
So there are some different groups who are interested in taking I would say at least one. I know that there's Meadowbrook Farm said that they would be happy to take some of the any overages that we have. And I mean, there's potential for using it in some of our own operations, in parks and gardens and that kind of thing. I don't expect to have a lot of overages. If we had a lot that we couldn't get rid of, I I guess the contingency plan would be to take it to the city and pay a tipping fee to dispose of it.
Okay. And then what about any contingencies in so I'm looking at the cash flow report that was presented to the Finance Advisory Committee, I think in December. So knowing that this is a new system that hasn't been adopted readily by very many municipalities, and it's not in use currently, I'm curious about the startup risk. So in that first year, that second year, if we don't get the sort of recipe dialed right, or if yard waste of larger than 12 inches does get mixed in, and the process takes longer than expected, or it doesn't come out right, and then we end up with a backlog of green waste. Is that factored into potential costs or contingency costs that might occur over that first year or over the startup life of the facility?
Well, the project contingency is at 25%, and I would say that's really just for capital costs. So I would say no, that hasn't been factored in. But what I will say is that compost is a pretty simple thing. Having the Augur system and having the ASP system is something that makes the process a lot more efficient. Just putting that waste into a pile in that building, compost will happen. It might take a little bit longer, but it will still happen. It might, run a little hot, or, it's not, it's just not that complicated.
The reason I asked, another system that's not supposed to be complicated is water. That, when we look at some of the other capital projects, particularly Cove Bay, which have used a technology that isn't in widespread use across other municipalities, that also ended up absorbing lots of design changes and still has problems with it. And I think it's a concern that some residents, including myself, in terms of, okay, well, are we actually budgeting for the risk that we might incur from a project, whether it's input that doesn't get processed right and then has to be sent to the mainland for tipping, whether it turns out that there isn't a lineup of people that don't want our output, and that gets sent over to the mainland for tipping, whether we throw a motor or an auger breaks, or if a tree falls on the enclosure of the building. We don't know that that's not included in the cash flow budget. So given that the margin of $70,000 seems attractive, it does seem, what I need to check out and what I have the responsibility to check out is whether we've actually price tagged those potential risks and accounted for them before we are an early adopter of a technology that's not in widespread use and is going to invoke a significant change in the way that we do things on the island.
With all due respect, I wouldn't call us an early adopter of this technology. The ASP technology has been around the industry standard for 40 years. The Green Mountain technology is running, 100 similar facilities in the States, not necessarily in BC, but there are plenty of systems up and running and have been for the past 30 years. It was recommended to us 10 years ago. That actual facility that they visited, and probably Sue Ellen went that site visit in Gibson's in 2015, was the same equipment that I saw functioning 10 years later in Power.
Right. Okay. And I think that handles my questions. And then we can look at the motion. Back to you, Sue Ellen, if you'd like to make the motion.
Thank you. And just delighted to make it because of all the prep work. I think this is I don't see it as being very different from what Bowen Islanders already do, except now you won't need a vehicle to go into the city to pick up soil amendments. Anyway, I would like to move that council direct staff to proceed with preparing a request for proposals for engineering, procurement, and construction of the on-island compost facility.
Moved by Councillor Fast. Seconded by Councillor Wake. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Saunders.
It's kind of a difficult one because it's a thank you. And thanks for your report. It was really detailed and you gave us most of the answers to questions. But for me, this is like I understand the desire for a facility such as this, but in an era, a present era where we've got significant infrastructure issues, the mayor alluded to the water system in his last comments. Well, we've got significant issues and raised taxes significantly. We'll be continuing to do so over the next, half decade or more. Looking at this, the return on the investment here it looks like it's a decade out and could be off by a little bit, but that's if everything goes well. That concerns me a bit. And while I agree that I was going to use the term early adopter, but you've talked me out of that because I think that's probably a fair comment you made. Thank you. But it still feels like there's a lot of questions around this to me and a lot of things that can go wrong. And while on the surface, it's a good idea and it's something that the community wants has certainly approved of in the past and spoken well of. I can understand that, but the cost of doing something like this, given all the other challenges we're facing right now, I'm not comfortable going in that direction. That's my own personal piece on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Discussion from other councillors?
This is really difficult, really, really difficult. I have been so supportive of this whole idea. Pretty much all the time I've been on board, watched the, discussion through ideas that might work so I really want this to happen. And when you add on the fact that we've got $1 million grant that we probably won't get again if we don't go ahead now. It's just it's very compelling. At the same time, I share all the concerns, and the last thing I want to do is be raising taxes even more than we already committed to. So it's really difficult. I guess my gut is telling me that we can't keep looking at things and going, well, we're not going to do that because it might fail. So I'm feeling like it might be worth taking the risk here. Well, I'm feeling like it is. It is worth taking the risk.
Councillor Saunders again?
Just a general comment, because this seems to come up a lot. When we start talking about grants and will we be giving away $1 million is sort of the consensus. If you have it, in this case, $1 million, but grants generally, we'd be giving away. Well, the other way to look at it is we actually be saving $600,000 or not spending $600,000 or re-spending it elsewhere where it might have more value for us. And just for me, the fact that the grants there is supportive, but it's not a deciding factor.
Thank you. Councillor Jurgensen?
Audio now.
I agree with Councillor Saunders that there's two ways to look at any grant application. You see this in the nonprofit space all the time, where sometimes the cost of carrying out a specific project isn't supported by the money that the contribution that's needed to be made by the organization applying for the grant. And I think in this case, facing continuing to raise taxes, as well as adding another large infrastructure project, it may not be the right time for that right now. I am concerned just with the if we keep adding these projects, and I believe it was Councilor Getty who mentioned this earlier in strategic planning. We talked about, not taking on a lot of new things right now, and resting and digesting. And I think that's maybe, something to at least consider in this decision.
Thank you, Councilor Jurgensen.
Press
Councilor Morris?
CMD tilde to reach pop-up and
I guess looking at the motion is just to go for quotation, to do an RFP, which I assume will give us firm prices. You're asking for equivalent of tenders.
Do it again.
We're gonna end up with a firm price as to how much it's gonna cost to build this thing when we do the RFP.
No, it wouldn't be a firm price because it's an engineering, because it's kind of like a design build, because the engineering has to be done by someone who's stamped in Canada to do the engineering, because the people we're working with from the States, they don't have the.
But will we have a firm price for the equipment?
For the equipment, yes.
As part of this process?
Yeah, we can get that.
And then the other concern is we've got to build it by March 31st, 2025 to get the grant. So we're not going to end up halfway through building and not get the grant. So how long is it going to take to actually build it? Or spend enough money to get the grant?
So we'll move on it as quickly as we can. The lead time for the Green Mountain Technologies equipment is 3 to 4 months. The lead time for the building is something like 12 to 16 weeks. And then once it's on site, it takes 2 weeks to put it together. So most things can be done fairly quickly as long as we get going.
If you're starting by June, we comfortably make the March deadline. How long is it going to take for the request for proposals to come in?
So typically an RFP process that is anywhere from 2 to 4 months, could be 6 months, depending if there's needing to be extensions. But I wanted to make a comment about the grant funding too. If we were on the project in construction, I know that we've already received grant extensions in the past for this project. I've never seen the province pull back funding from a project that is under construction. So if it's identified that you're making headway, they almost always will extend if necessary. It's not 100% guarantee, but they'll work to their best to ensure that you get all your full funding. With the RFP, it is a request for proposals initially for it's called the engineering procurement model. It's like a construction management model. And so that doesn't include committing us at that moment to the entire project. It's more so for the engineering firm or engineer that would help with the design process for then solidifying the construction elements of the project, which would go to tender separately.
So we're going to have a second process then to go for tender for getting the equipment and tender for a contractor.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Carla, but essentially we would be looking at the engineer procurement model would be securing the engineer who would then work with us to secure the contractor that would do the construction. And the Green Mountain Technologies would be providing the technology and assisting with the assembly on site.
So the contractor is going to do site prep and basically putting up the shelter, so
Correct.
Green Mountain comes. Well, I guess we could still pull the plug after we get the RFP for the engineers.
Thank you, Councilor Morse.
One more, I was just gonna say, worst case scenario, looking at the spreadsheet, is that we don't sell anything. So it would cost us about 55,000 a year for the first 3 years, if I'm looking at December 11th report. And at the end, and then after that, it would be 70,000+ a year going ahead in net savings.
Correct.
So it would take 4 years to recoup 5 years worth of expense. That's worst case scenario, if we don't sell anything.
Correct. Thank you, Councilor Morse. Just on that, looking at that cash flow projection, I mean, there's a couple of pieces there as well. As repairs and maintenance are only budgeted $2,000 per year. None of those figures of our expenditures include cost escalations or inflation, except for the reduction in tipping fees, which has been projected into the future. So from my standpoint, this feels like a project that is mired in risk. There's a lot of risk in this project in a capital works program where we already have a lot of risk. We have risk in Cove Bay, and cost escalations there. We have risks in our community center. We have lots of capital works projects, roads, culverts, water that are on the go right now. And my concerns with this project are that I don't believe that operational contingencies have been accounted for. Knowing what it takes to start up, something that we don't have any experience in right now. We also know that my understanding is that the Bowen Waste contract, who will be operating this facility, is up for renewal in 2026. The last time that contract was up for renewal, we saw a huge increase of what it took to process waste on the island. And I'm not sure what that portends for the operation of this unit. There's the issue of funding. We know that taxes are going up and they're increasing significantly in the municipality over the next few years. And those taxes are going for capital, are largely going to capital programs, and taking on something new without this experience in doing it. And, the word early adopter might be unfair, sure, but it certainly feels like we're the only adopter of this program. In BC. My knowledge of the system is that it has been used to great success for agricultural uses and for other uses, but for municipal green waste there haven't been a lot of examples that we've been able to point to or draw expertise from in other communities. Concerned that the labor cost on this is going to, may not be captured accurately, particularly for these first couple of years, or even if that we can find labor to do this. So given the challenges that we have already in the municipality, given the financial challenges that we have in the municipality, given the risk of what is effectively taking over wholesale our own green waste operation and adding a compost sale operation to it as well, strikes me as problematic, to put it charitably. I don't know what happens if we can't process the waste. I don't know what happens if folks don't take the output and we're left with piles of organic processed pre-topsoil in that waste yard. And as a result, it's just not a risk that I'm willing to incur. And as a result, I will not be voting in favor of this motion. Councillor Jurgensen.
Unmute audio.
Understanding that there's been a lot of work put into this project, would it be fair to potentially defer a final decision on this to the next council meeting and allow some of these questions to be answered? Or is that out of the question at this point due to grant timelines?
We could. I mean, we do have a motion on the table, so it depends on the disposition of this motion. So we can see where that goes and then look at alternatives from there. Councillor Morse.
Just one last, how much is it going to cost us to do this? request for proposals. Fairly simple amount of staff time.
Yeah.
And with that, I will, it's been a while since we heard the motion. Can we read the motion back and we'll,
Yes, so it's that council direct staff to proceed with preparing a request for proposals for engineering, procurement, and construction of the on-island compost facility.
okay, and I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 All opposed, raise your hand, say nay.
Audio now unmuted.
So motion is defeated with Councillor Saunders, Councillor Wade, Councillor Getty, Councillor Durkinson, and Mayor Leonard in opposition.
The other way. There's two minorities in favor.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I'll just let the staff, do we need an alternative motion on this, or does that suffice for the time being?
I don't know that an alternative is needed. I think it's pretty clear direction. Mayor, if I may, I just want, just like to take the opportunity to thank Carla Skuse for all of her efforts on this project. It's been a very long endeavor, and that of the Knickknack Nook as well, and their efforts too to try to advance this project. I'm hopeful that perhaps one day we will see on-island composting, but it's understandable the decision that council has made today, given that other issues and challenges. So, but thank you, Carl.
Yeah, it's just to sum up the conversation, it feels like definitely feels like a right project, but it feels like you could certainly use another funder to come on board and perhaps contribute a significant amount more for the community share, as well as just the wrong time. So thank you for moving on to item 8.2, update from our CAO. Brief update from our CAO.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Capital projects. So the construction of the community center continues, and there's continued questions and concerns for why we still see a blue roof instead of a silver metal roof, which should be there. We have been meeting more frequently with the builder on this particular topic. I met with the vice president of the company last week on site with senior members of his team as well, and they assured us that it's now moving forward as quickly as possible. So we're hopeful that we'll see some activity there in the very near future. Before any metal roofing can go on, though, there does need to be a second look at the roof. We did have a third-party roofing inspector show up and have a look at the envelope that's on the building, and there may be the possibility of moving forward without having to remove the entire membrane, but there are sections of the roof where we do need to cut back the blue membrane and expose some of the insulation underneath, which is likely wet, and that to be replaced. So at the very least, we will see those problem areas on the roof addressed, and there is still the possibility of the entire blue membrane being replaced as well, depending on whether or not the manufacturer can give us quality assurance that it will be okay with the roof on top of it. So while I'm frustrated with the length of time it's taken to get to putting a roof on, I am still confident that when we do get a roof on, it will be done properly and there will be no concerns or issues with any of the underlay materials there either. Inside the building, though, there's a ton of amazing work being done, and it's pretty exciting to see all of the rooms really taking shape with much of the drywall being completed. There's still some more to go. And so you can really start to get a sense and feel of what the space will look like. Currently, the builder's schedule identifies the end of April as a handover date, but we're anticipating an updated schedule any day now, and I don't doubt that that'll be pushed out a little bit further. just looking at the amount of work that's needed to be completed, it would be have to complete all of that by the end of April. So we'll be informed when we get an updated schedule of completion. In terms of the multi-use path, we just had a brief update from the Director of Engineering today, so I won't touch on that. And same thing with the drinking water treatment plant. We're still working with the technology provider on solutions to the current challenges with that facility, and hope to have a more full update for the public very soon. And in terms of the wastewater outfall project, we are going to be hoping to be able to advance that project in the very near future. I do think that we'll have a staff response to the Union Steamships. Yeah, it's on the agenda there, so we'll have a staff response to that. That's it for my capital project update at this time.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, moving on. Correspondence 9.1. Monica Sawchuk from Ministry of Environment and Climate Readiness regarding Indigenous Engagement Requirements Funding Program dated January 12, 2024. Can I have someone move the recommendation, please? Councilor Wake.
Whereas Bowen Island Municipality is to receive a contribution of $40,000 from the province of BC to support implementation of the Emergency and Disaster Management Act through the Indigenous Engagement Requirements Funding Program, and whereas BIM must select eligible activities in its agreement with the province to receive such funds, Council select activities 1A and 1B, a list of eligible activities that will assist with the development and implementation of emergency management plans and the inclusion of cultural safety and Indigenous knowledge in any or all phases of emergency management.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Morse. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. That carries unanimously. 9.2, Otis Peterson, Union Steamship Company Limited regarding transparent inquiries, Cove Sewer outfall crisis dated February 4th, 2024. The recommendation is that council direct staff to review the correspondence from Otis Peterson dated February 4th, 2024. Report back to council with comments. I have a mover for that recommendation, moved by Councilor Getty.
I was wondering if we could add the comments made in the public comment section to that.
Okay, so that council direct staff to review the correspondence from Otis Peterson dated February 4th, 2024, as well as public comments made at the February 12th, 2024 meeting of council. Report back to council with comments.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Morse.
Audio
Any
now
discussion?
muted.
Any discussion? Seeing none, or any comments from the Director of Engineering? Are you here preemptively?
I'm just here in case there's any discussion or questions.
Preemptively.
Yes.
Thank you. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that carries unanimously. I look forward to hearing that, as I know that's both been in the news and in our email boxes lately. Item 9.3, Bowen Island Resilient Community Housing regarding a request for support and applying for a Bowen Island Community Foundation grant. The recommendation provided on table is that council endorse the proposed application, Bowen Island Community Foundation for the Lot 1 phased development plan project. Is there a mover for that recommendation?
Audio now.
Moved by Councilor Wake, seconded by Councilor Fast. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Audio now muted.
Aye. Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 10.1, Crown Land Opportunities for Non-Market Housing. The recommendation from the Housing Advisory Committee is that council direct staff to write a letter to the province expressing interest in acquiring Crown land for the construction of affordable housing pursuant to the recently announced BC Builds Program opportunity, details of which are outlined in the attached report. I'll look to perhaps our council representatives on the committee if you'd like to make that motion. Speak to it. Councilor Wick.
Let's make the motion.
And I'll look for a seconder for the motion. Second by Councillor Saunders, okay. And Councillor Wake to speak to it, and then Councillor Morris.
So we've had a letter just today, which I think we need to be clear on what this is about. This is not about clearing great swaths of Crown land. It's going to be more of a surgical proposal to a piece of land that would work well and so I think the concerns about some big push to have huge housing developments on Crown land it's not what we're talking about here. It's something more granular and every little bit would really help.
Thank you, Councillor Wake. Councillor Morris, then Councillor Getty.
I'm not opposed to the concept. My concern is the timing. The second report, paragraph, we didn't have this background at Housing Advisory Committee. So I'm okay with asking the province for Crown land for affordable housing, but it says municipalities have been invited to identify underused price. So we actually have a letter of invitation other than this verbal thing from Lisa Helps.
I'll look to staff to provide that answer.
There was a call out to all local governments to identify lands that could be, and I don't recall receiving like a specific letter to mayor and council, more like a general call, and they're looking to municipally owned lands.
That's what's my suspicion.
They're not looking for a call to identify other owned lands.
Yeah, so without seeing
Their own
that
land.
and the reference to government land, and also my, understanding of the process within internally, when we got the Ferry Fen Crown grant for the Islands Trust, that was a free Crown grant dollars from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, which then gave the revenue to whichever ministry at that point held the forest lands. And so we're not sending it to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, which I think we need to. And I guess without them actually sending out a letter asking, they're all going to look at it and say, the ministers is going to say, what am I supposed to do with this? So I'm a little thinking, are we premature in asking for this? It was only 2 members of the Housing Advisory Committee that met with Lisa Helps, not all of us. So we didn't have a chance to ask it. So I'm wondering if we should be waiting till after the housing forum, which is the next 2 days that UBCM's having, and she's a speaker there, where we can actually clarify, is it this call out was for public land, and is it just our land, or, who specifically is managing this project that we actually write to, so we'll know what we're talking about. My concern is the timing issue.
No, you want a big shot? No stab. Thank you, Councillor Morris. Councillor Getty, and then Councillor Fast.
It's an interesting process in terms of there's some sort of a call out from the province in terms of BC builds. And it would be, I'd like to see that correspondence or whatever it was included in a some sort of an agenda item, either by
What correspondence is?
whatever it was. There's a some sort of a call from the province to identify publicly owned lands. So whatever it was, somehow or other, I think the process is supposed to be that it goes to council and then it goes out to committees. So that we've got some sort of a heads up that this is a possibility. I think that if we wanted to talk to the province in terms of giving them a heads up that, if they want to start messing with the Crown lands, we really want to talk about it, whether it's logging or whether it's housing or whether it's anything, in terms of our water sources and all the rest of it. But I think that I don't understand what the BC Build program is. I don't understand what it is that they're going after. I don't understand what it is that the advisory committee is suggesting in terms of the lots. I've got so many questions at this point. So I think that I'm not sure what the deadline is. I think if we want to give the province a heads up, very generally, that we're interested in talking to them about anything to do with Crown lands, as opposed to pinning us down to this area, this idea, this anything more specific than that. I'd like it to be more broadly discussed, both in terms of council and certainly some of the letters we've been getting from the community. So, or at least some of the things that I've ended up with. We're stepping into Crown lands, and it's like
Thank you,
just
Councillor
the lodging thing.
Councillor Fast, and then I will make my own comments.
Thank you. I'm just, I'm not in favor of this for many of the reasons that Councillor Getty and others have already described, including Councillor Morse. I also was in a meeting with Lisa Helps, and this was back November 28th. I sent a letter to council about Bowen got a lot of attention today. I was one of the few elected folks in a online webinar. And so I was on the spot in the breakout groups. How much municipal land do you have and where is it? And so I spoke about lot 1. Lisa Helps of lead of BC Builds asked how big. And I gave her the number, and staff promptly transposed it into acres, 20 acres or whatever lot 1 is. And she's working with that idea in mind. Heather McNell of Metro Vancouver was there too and mentioned Bowen as an early adopter, already signed up. So this was about the pre-zoned, pre-approved, prefab kind of BC Builds introductions. And I too think we should hear more about it. Personally, I would like to see how it fits with the official community plan, which currently our official community plan says 1 village center, and that's over in the Snug Cove area. It says that watersheds will be protected and that greenways that carry wildlife back and forth should be considered, and fragmentation is sort of rampant. I'm wondering about recharge areas for the trees and the ponds down below on the, I guess it's the golf course down below. I don't have enough information to really say very much about it, except that I think this letter, in contrast to the one right above, 9.3, where we've got some background and we've got work already underway by staff and volunteer hours from groups. And I would like to focus on lot 1, at least until we've got more information. And I don't want to spread ourselves too thin on an important project like this that seems to be not aligned with parts of the official community plan, which is our kind of overall island design. It's at the site is not on transit, and I don't mean to be dismissive. I just think it's really early to think about this, and I think I'll be voting against it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fast. I was in the speaking order, so I will just make my comments. I'm not adverse to discussing the disposition of Crown land on the island and writing letters to the province suggesting where housing could be built or where other uses could be built. This does feel like it's new. It feels like it's strategic. And I would make the motion that council refer this to its next strategic planning session for consideration, as opposed to making a decision now.
I was going to make a motion to defer to our next council meeting until after we've been to the UBC and Housing Center.
Right. So I did make a motion. If there's a seconder to
seconding your motion.
Seconding. And then to speak to that motion, you have to discuss the process of how we take up new business and new initiatives. And it feels like just conversation around the table. There needs to be some staff weighing in on this. I think we need to have a more wholesome discussion at the council table. And even if it was to come back after the UBCM housing session, it would still remain as a new and strategic initiative that I think is best dealt with in strategic planning. Any discussion on that motion before I call the question? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of referring this to our next strategic planning session, raise your hand, say aye. And that carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to 10.2, proposed Heritage Bridge Restoration Project referral response on the Heritage Commission and the Parks, Trails and Greenways Advisory Committee. I will note that there is a third recommendation listed here that came in the revised agenda, the recommendation based on response from Metro Vancouver dated February 9th, 2024. I did receive correspondence from Metro Vancouver that owing to the environmental concerns around it being a fish-bearing stream and with the salmon, that they have, Metro Vancouver has declined to support the construction of a bridge at the Bridal Veil Falls site. And the recommendation that I drafted in response to this was that it's really Metro Vancouver's property. It's their jurisdiction. They've done the environmental assessment. And I don't know what other role there is for council other than to respect Metro Vancouver's jurisdiction and environmental assessment. Not support the project at this time. Councillor Getty. Oh. Okay, so I will move that third recommendation that says, whereas the Metro Vancouver Regional District, the property owners and the whole jurisdiction over Crippen Park, and whereas the Metro Vancouver Regional District have provided notification declining to support reconstructing the bridge at Bridal Veil Falls in Crippen Regional Park, stating that, quote, Killarney Creek is an active salmon-bearing stream and the proposal would pose significant environmental impacts to the sensitive riparian area. That council respect Metro Vancouver's jurisdiction and environmental assessment and not support the Japanese Canadian Legacies project at Bridal Veil Falls at this time. Seconded by Councillor Fast. Any discussion on this motion? Councillor Getty, followed by Councillor Saunders.
When we did a walkabout in the area with the Legacy Society, there was some talk about they were really keen in terms of having the bridge, but we understood that there would potentially be some problems on the far north side of the site, and that's where the fish ladder is. And there was, I'm not sure if it was with the Legacy people or with the heritage or the archives people, but is there some way that we could encourage the historians and archives and possibly our Heritage Commission to pursue whether or not there could be at least the information signs and some sort of a something that's on the up away from the fish ladder on the south side that would honor the fact that the original bridge was built and the commitment and the contributions that were made, and to be part of the funding for not only this everybody's willing to fund it 100%, but also just to have some sort of recognition in the community that it doesn't exist at this point. So an alternative, and see whether, I mean, I don't know if we've got the extension of time, but to see whether or not there's a smaller project that would check off some of the boxes in terms of information and heritage.
Councillor Getty, Councillor Saunders, then Councillor Jurgensen.
Just out of curiosity, given what Metro has come back with and their reasoning, does that absolutely preclude us from doing anything, or what's the legality of our? Yeah, the answer is yes. So it's not a lot of discussion left then in my mind.
Yeah, not on that particular project. There was an email thread going that continued on from our chair of the Heritage Committee or Commission, where Metro Vancouver has expressed some interest in maybe doing something interpretive. And they're sort of working through that with the Japanese Canadian Legacy Society, and I would presume the Museum of Archives. But ultimately, it's not our land and it's not our jurisdiction. And I think that's like the municipal entity that governs that land is Metro Vancouver. Should there be a desire to do something on library land or here at the new community center, that would be for us to take on, but really it's Metro Vancouver. I'm going to go to Councillor Jurgensen first and then Councillor Getty.
Audio now on mute.
I think as so often happens when it comes to heritage, Getty, a lot of the points I was going to make, I I do feel that what I would like to add is that I think it's tremendously important this element of Bowen's heritage be acknowledged and preserved. The legacy of Japanese Canadians, or sorry, Canadians of Japanese descent, to this community. Should not be forgotten. And I think even if Metro was not to pursue any interpretive project, I do think that's something that the Heritage Commission should look into alternatives to ensure that we don't lose that heritage.
Councillor Jurgensen, Councillor Getty, followed by Councillor Fast.
Do we have to make a recommendation and give direction to the Heritage Commission to pursue discussions with Metro concerning alternatives?
The Heritage Commission should not be discussing directly with Metro. The Heritage Commission as a body of council would be at this level, at the council level, that we would do the intergovernmental piece.
Okay. So
if the Heritage Commission has a recommendation that they could come up with, but again, the waters are a bit murkier because it's Metro Vancouver's property.
yes.
It's the regional district.
So if we want to investigate possible alternatives, then we should be drafting a letter to Metro to see whether or not they'd be open to negotiating anything else.
You could. I would be hesitant to take it on. I think it's this. So this project's surfaced by a community group. It's surfaced through the Museum and Archives as well as a community member, and it would be. My encouragement would be, I think that's awesome. And I think it's great when we have grassroots community-led initiatives that want to pursue this. So I would encourage those groups to.
But it was the Legacy Society that wanted the council.
Audio now.
Right. To some degree, I think the Legacy Society needed to be shaped a little bit towards understanding that it was Metro Vancouver's jurisdiction and that we really don't have any control over that land. And that's, they're not a senior level of government. I mean, it's just the regional district and it's their chunk of within municipal boundaries. Councillor Fast.
I'd just like to point out that there is already a sign, and this is a project, Digital Heritage Trail, based on the original walking tour pamphlet, Suzanne McNeil, Bybet Thompson, Bowen Heritage in 1997. So there are these stops, and you can look at you put your phone up to the GPS, sorry, the
QR code.
Oh, QR code, thank you. It shows a picture of the Japanese bridge. It says at the beginning of the causeway, look carefully, Lagoon Trail Scenic Walk to Bridal Veil Falls. At one time, rustic cedar rails lined the walkway was built by Japanese style by skilled workers employed by Captain Cates. Maybe it could be revisited, but this was a project done in cooperation with Greater Vancouver Regional District Parks at the time, and they received funding from Heritage BC. So it's already in place. Maybe it just needs updating. Perhaps this could be something that could be revisited, but the photos there, and I put the link in the chat. If you click that, you'll see the photo of the Japanese bridge, Lagoon Trail to Bridal Veil Falls. So I just don't think it needs to be a project of Bowen Island Council at this time. Thank you.
Councillor Fast. Councillor Morris, then I'll call the question.
I just wanted to get on with the question. It's now 10 after 4.
I will call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Mute audio.
And that carries unanimously. Thank you. New business, 11 update to Council on Metro Vancouver business, Metro Vancouver Director Mayor Andrew Leonard, which is me. The Metro Vancouver Board of Directors meeting was held January 26th. Not a whole lot new in that meeting. The perhaps most interesting piece is that Metro Vancouver the Board of Directors simultaneously voted to accelerate planning towards climate targets and reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, but also rejected a proposal to make concrete implementation towards regulating greenhouse gases in large buildings across the region, which is delegated authority under the province. So will lead to some interesting conversations moving forward about planning versus concrete action when it comes to climate. The Regional Parks Committee meeting was held last week as well. Not a lot new in that public meeting. There were some actually really nice videos that they had put together around conservation and particularly fish estuaries. So I would, anyone that's interested in Metro Vancouver's work on the conservation side as opposed to the camping and park use side, I would highly encourage a perusal of that meeting because it was actually quite fascinating, some of the work that they were doing environmentally and from a conservation standpoint. And councils was held on February 3rd. I did duck out a bit early, but I caught the bulk of Minister Kahlon's speech to councils, but I'll let Councillor Wake fill us in briefly on some of the high points of that meeting.
So Minister of Housing, Ravi Kahlon, spoke, and the main topic was new legislation with respect to housing. He mentioned the inclusionary zoning, the density bonusing, the BC Builds program, which sounds like we need to hear a little bit more about. And maybe we will at the Housing Summit coming up this week. He mentioned increased funding for non-market housing, which is encouraging. We need to find out more about exactly what that means for us, but that's, I think, exactly what we need. And pushing the federal, there were questions about what about infrastructure? You know, we can get all this housing, but we have to have the infrastructure to support it. And the minister indicated that we'll be pushing the federal government for infrastructure dollars. He got a question about prefab offsite construction and why is it stalled and so slow? And the response was the building industry is resistant to change and there's challenges with lack of trades. But they're working on the prefab and mass timber. And he finished that off by saying prefab and mass timber is the future. So he's certainly heading in that direction. Then we heard from Heather McNell, Deputy CAO, with feedback from members. Then some regional context statements pertaining to the regional growth strategy, which we are not part of. And it does make the question for me if we need a growth strategy. So I don't know if we can get any help from Metro on that or not.
Thank you, Councillor Wick. 11.2, update to Council on TransLink Mayor's Council. The biggest public-facing issues with the TransLink are the continuing press to the provincial and federal governments to fund the Access for Everyone plan. I would encourage folks that are interested in signing up to send a letter to the province or feds or stay updated on some of the transportation issues in the region to head over to accessforeveryone.ca and drop your email address in there. And moving on to 11.3, update to Council on Islands Trust business. Start with the in-room folks, so Councillor Getty and then Councillor Fast. Or Trustee Getty and Trustee Fast.
Okay, so the CAO for the trust had announced at our last meeting and that he was going to be retiring and that we had until June to come up with the hiring process. So we've formed a hiring committee and that's taking up a lot of time. So that's the chairs of all of the standing committees. I'm on it because of the governance or as a bonus as part of the governance committee. We're meeting every other week to try and sort out what the parameters are for hiring a public servant and the public servant process. We've got a trust council meeting coming up on March the 12th and everybody's working on building up the agenda for that. But it's still in the very minimal planning stages. We're going to take a chunk of time for strategic planning. And then I've got a governance committee coming up February the 23rd. So I'm just in the process of starting to work up an agenda for that, that has to be published at the end of this week, so busy, but nothing much content to report.
Thank you, Trustee Getty. Over to you, Trustee Fast.
Thanks. Just a couple of things. I've got a trust programs committee meeting this week. That agenda. I'm sorry, I'm hearing an echo, but I'll just continue on. That agenda is posted at the islandstrust.bc.ca website for Wednesday, if anybody's interested in looking at that. And just like to point out, item 12.11 in our agenda is about the groundwater webinar. That'll be 7 o'clock tomorrow evening. So I'll be tuning in for that. That is related to the freshwater strategy for the whole Islands Trust area. One of the things your trustees have been doing over the past few years is budgeting and paying expert professional staff to create this groundwater strategy, freshwater strategy in with the province. So there's good stuff there for those who are worried about wells and groundwater and healthy ecosystems and all that kind of thing. 7 o'clock tomorrow. You can register online, and it's in that 12.1 agenda item for anybody who's listening, who's interested. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Fast, and I just did register. Councillor Morse.
I just, with respect to the budget, which will get passed at the March 12th council meeting, if I'm understanding timing correctly, the requisition for us is up to 428,000 or something for the initial. We have had no real explanation as to why it's more. And usually there's some budget consultation going on, and I looked at news releases today and I looked at the financial planning and committee agenda, and I can't see any reference at all to any budget consultations to the general populace in the Islands Trust. So, and from what I understand and looking at the financial planning committee's notes or the last budget, there's very little tax increase percentage-wise to, or if any, to the local trust areas, except for us, which is quite a bit more than last year. I don't know if you, so I guess the question is there going to be any budget consultation to the general public that was referred to at all at the December Trust Council meeting, or?
See, Trustee Fast with their hand up.
Yeah, there's been a bunch of work done, and Islands Trust, because of the weird timelines, and they've looked back into the legislation, they don't have to do budget consultation. It always came so late in the process that it was because Islands Trust Trust Council only meets 4 times a year. It was extremely difficult to make the effort that people put into the consultation play a role in the consultation. So as I understand it, budget consultation has been paused.
Okay, so they don't need to consult on the budget, so they're not going to.
Well, they weren't able to make the budget consultation meaningful in the time between December and then when it had to be adopted in March. But I'm not on the financial planning committee, and I'm not, I'm a municipal trustee. I'm over here on the trust programs committee dealing with other things. So I don't have a lot more info, except I every other year, the number for the Bowen requisition has decreased from the first cut. So I don't expect that we'll be paying that much, but I have no other information. Thank you.
Thank you. And just maybe to the CFO, have we had any information regarding Islands Trust requisition and
I did receive on December 31st, I did receive the draft amount from the Islands Trust CFO, just for information. But again, there's not much of an opportunity for consultation.
Okay. Perhaps, maybe we could ask the trustees then, if you have the opportunity to connect with staff to get some more clarity as to the magnitude of the increase, as without explanation, I think it's going to be lead to some questions in the community about value for money if it's not explained clearly. Certainly questions from the mayor. Okay, moving on to item 13, question period. You've absolutely shredded the timing on the agenda, so I apologize. You can't win them all. But if there are any members of the public or online that wish to ask questions, see none. Moving to item 14, motion to adjourn. Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Saunders. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. That carries. Take a short break and come